twice a month, right? I'll call the meeting to order. It's another special meeting of the Coastal Commission, AKA Advisory Commission on Coastal Waters. And the purpose tonight, there's an agenda here, and there's the draft number 4 of the proposed ordinances for moorings. This is a special meeting, so we're going to stick just to what we have in the agenda. The purpose is to elect new officers. I don't know if you knew that was coming up, but we had a slate manifest itself in the last couple weeks. So we're going ahead with that just in the nick of time for the 2024 season. And then we'll get right on to the review of the recommended ordinance changes. This is our second cut at the review. We had a great session last time. I think it was like 3 hours. We all killed ourselves to about 10:30 at night. Unless you all think differently, I thought I would marshal this to close at 9, right on the dot. My thought would be this, it's an input session, right? We're not going to take a vote. There's more work to be done of a lawyer, perhaps with talking to the Board of Selectmen. This has a lot of process steps. I think our process step at this end of the work the committee needs to do would be finished tonight by 9. Other things could take place at other special meetings going forward, but I thought this side of the holidays were probably closed out for input. So unless anyone feels differently, that's how I'll run the meeting, and we should, I guess, guard our time and comment so that we do end by 9 if the important things being done first. And I think, Sam, you had a good suggestion about what things to stick to in terms of keeping it efficient up front. So. Anyway, so with that being sort of the rules of play today, I'd like to get on with our general election. And I think we're missing a couple of the officers who scared them off already, right? So this is for our 2024 officer slate. And it's interesting. I think once we elect them tonight, they're not officially the officers until the 2024 season. But what I was going to say is, which is January 1 on, what I was going to say is that John Zagrodzky is new. He's asked for input from us on some. Hey, Julie, how you doing? Your ears were buzzing, no doubt. I was going to say, so we're about to hold elections, and I was going to say, well, there's no rules set forward, like when the new leadership team takes over. Generally speaking, since it's a 2024 leadership team, I think that means January 1. But we've got things in play with John Zagrodzky about forward-looking plans. And as I've been an interim, I'm going to invite you guys into everything, whoever next gets elected, let's put it that way, into everything that goes on with John. So in effect, it's a handover in many respects as at the end of this evening, post-election. So again, I'll stay in place and be glad to rope in the new leadership team each and every move as it goes along. I guess just before we vote, I wanted to say that we had renominations from everybody, and almost all of us have re-upped, so that's good. So basically, you'll see the same faces going forward for the new year. And that includes myself, by the way, in a regular commissioner fashion.
Does that leave any open seats?
It does, one. So we've got one open seat. It's an R. Yeah. R. Which I think means it could be filled by an R or a D or an I, right? Because it's the, yeah. So anyways, that was good on the nominations. Thank you all for your emails and support of the commission going forward. And so with that, I think I'd like to just get to the leadership election. I think the easiest way to do this is to just open the floor up to nominations. And I think I will serve to nominate the first set that are known, and that's a slate of 2 co-chairs and 1 vice chair. And that would be Julie Jones as 1 co-chair, Bill Wright as another co-chair, and David Kahn as the vice chairman. So what I was going to suggest is we just would have that as a ensemble, a slate that we could just vote up or down on, but I open the floor up for any other nominations at this point of officers. All right.
Can we just second it?
I don't think you have to, but
okay, good.
Go ahead. Yeah, I looked up Robert's Rules of Orders. I thought Laurie would be here to correct me on some points, so
She would.
yeah. But anyway, but thank you. I think we're good. So with that, why don't, just through ayes for the nominated slate. You can, and I'll go too.
Noted as unanimous.
And it is unanimous. Any nays? I'll just ask. Oh, something comes from the balcony.
How about thanks? Can we offer thanks?
Yeah, thanks, that's right. So that's good. So Julie?
Thanks to you too, Bill.
Oh,
Yes.
appreciation very much. That's great, thank you. So Julie Jones and Bill Wright and David Connor are our new leadership team. That's great, thank you. And I also wanted to thank Jim Furlong for this last year being the interim vice chair. I really appreciated it, and you've done some good things on the commission. That's great, thank you. Okay, good. That's business over. And let's then turn to our mooring policy committee and the review of the recommended ordinance changes. And do you need a copy? Yeah.
Does anyone not have a copy of version 4? Either the clean version or the marked up version? Does anyone need one?
I assume it's the same as what arrived in the
Email.
that you came, okay, then yes, I'm fine then.
So I'll turn this over to Kevin as head of the committee and the committee members.
Yeah, so let me give you a shot at the process update. So you have in your hands version 4. I think it's marked draft 4. This reflects the input from the subcommittee as well as the input from this group. So it is meant to reflect that input up through a given point, and we'll go to that point in a second. So you have that, hopefully you feel that you've been heard. So that's what we will focus on moving forward today. We'll get back in a second. Another aspect of an update is I've engaged Kate Bush, who is the Darien Town Administrator, along the lines, I think, Julie, your feedback is, and others have been, what belongs in an ordinance, what belongs in regulation. So we've engaged Kate to give us some of that guidance. She's agreed to do so. She agreed that, in principle, some of the stuff clearly was regulation. I thought we would have the benefit of her thinking prior to tonight. We did not. She's agreed to complete that by the end of this week. She stays on. So that's an intent to either break up this into the respective areas of ordinance versus regulation, give us some guidance about, what are the, by moving to geographic and ordinance versus regulation, does that mean any implications to enforceability, ability to modify? Does one body need to go in front of an RTM versus a non-RTM? So we'll get some guidance there. So that's just an update on that one. I'm thinking there is some view that says Kate is the appropriate party. Do we go to Kate before town council? Do we go to Kate with town council? I'm going to look to some feedback from Kate about how to best manage that, as well as either John Zagrodsky or others in the know about how to manage that. But we want to get to an efficient process that, at the end of the day, reflects the input on the recommendation of the commission, the harbor master, and is housed in the geography that supports our intent going forward. Any questions on those two updates? Okay, good. So the suggestion, mindful of two ideas. Number one, the idea that we want to finish by 9 tonight, because I think we can. I'm going to suggest that we approach the version 4 on the following basis. If you bring forth your document and look to page number 6, I think it's described as 6, section 7832, rights and responsibilities of the mooring holder. You see that in C, that is where we finished up at the wee hours of our last meeting.
It's
so the
page
suggestion,
number 7 if you're looking at the black line. So it
black line,
depends on
okay.
the
So geographically, that's where we're at. So my suggestion is we essentially continue with this input from the commission on this area that we have not reviewed. Let's get that in so we at least have a reflection of the input from the commission, the greater commission, on all aspects of this. Thereafter, we can go back in the original preamble and go through that as well. So that would suggest that's a path to get through by 9. Anyone object to that process?
Were there other changes made to the first path in addition to what this group kind of talked about and went around?
My judgment is no.
Okay.
I think it properly reflects that. You will be I'm hoping you have reviewed that section, but I believe both the intersection of my notes and crediting Flip for the work of of incorporating those contents in there. I believe that it reflects all the notes and input that you gave to us at our last session.
Wasn't there, I
Let's
think
put
the
it this
chart,
way, the intent of these changes was just to put the impact, the consensus from the last discussion into the document, not to go broader.
was the
than-
chart-
Other than, we did, as Sam and I were working through the language on the town harbor definitions, we felt it might be helpful if we can, I don't even know if this is something you can do in ordinances or something else, but to include an actual chart showing this. So we put this in, this is just a first cut at the chart. I note that I did not put either Tokenie Harbor in, which I can do, and then 5 Mile River Harbor is really hard to get onto something like this because it's so skinny. So, but if,
Have what you're looking at? Sorry to interrupt.
it's in your,
Should be about page 3 in what you've got.
yeah, it should be in your document.
It looks obviously like this, well, rather than obvious. This is now
All right, you've
on
got
the
it.
block version.
I was,
Oh, yeah.
sorry, I got it.
So if people like this concept, I will try to take another cut at it. Maybe, I think the resolution somehow didn't come out that great on this one, but it's, a picture is worth 1,000 words,
No,
so
it's great.
it makes it much easier to say it's right there.
So Grant, if we play this out, we're going to go back and work on the section
Yeah.
where we left off, and then come back, and then if you have some, for example, feedback on the definitions of this geography, or the map, or chart, give me a chart, we'll
I
get there.
think Flip answered it, that the intent of the edits were in line with
Yeah.
what
Yep.
we all went through that last time. It's great.
Okay, cool.
That's terrific. Cool, thank you.
Okay, any questions on our process going for this evening? Okay, then if I could bring your attention to section 7832, rights and responsible mooring holder, and C. Let's pick up, I think we discussed C at some, let's just review C. Any questions or any feedback on mooring holders up to 2 permitted moorings in Darien Harbor? Questions,
So-
feedback?
I'll continue on this one. I didn't like this last time, but I'm going to come at it again, maybe with more eloquent words. I think it should be 1, but I think we can make exceptions for certain categories that will make this palatable for those who believe it should be 2. I think the key thing we're trying to signal with this effort is equitable access to the mooring field. And I think right away, 2 sends the wrong signal. I think we can achieve the same result of accommodating reasonable cases, but still have it be, the standard rule be 1. And what would be reasonable exceptions? Having perhaps 1 mooring in a berthing harbor, Darien Harbor, and 1 in a day harbor. Someone having littoral rights and a mooring off their property, and having a mooring in Darien Harbor. Someone having a mooring in Holly Pond, which is so infrequently used by so many people, and it doesn't allow you to connect to the sound very easily, that you wouldn't want to deny that person a harbor and a mooring in the main harbor, Northern Harbor. So I think we could carve out, grandfather, allow for exceptions to that, even things that perhaps John would, in his discretion, feel were equitable. But I think it's important to set the general rule as 1, because this whole thing is about allowing access to the harbor under what most residents see as the duress of a very long wait list.
So there's an opinion, and maybe if we want to go back and go through the issue, I'll offer the contrary position. As a factual matter, each of the mooring waiting lists we know to be not so long or create such a hardship such that if a mooring owner or a potential boat owner wishes to place a mooring in Darien Harbor, there is access to moorings as we speak. They may not prefer the geographic location of that, but as a practical matter, there is no waiting list for moorings.
No, that is inaccurate, I'm
Well,
sorry.
Allow me to continue. What I'd like to see is then going forward for each of these meetings, let's get to facts. Let's say, for example, how many moorings, what are the wait lists in each of those locations? What are the list of people that have passed on their mooring opportunity and moved down the list? So if we're going to approach this in a different fashion, then I think we should approach it in this fashion that the town uses for things like town permits for parking, where there is a procedural process. There is nothing that says one can't have more than one. There's a waiting list that's accepted for if you want a parking permit, if you want to, you have to accept that there's a waiting list. And there's a procedure that says, really, what is the actual list? So I'll be the contrarian that says, I don't think that there is a requirement. I don't think there's a pressing need to move from any number to less than 2. And I'd like to see the facts before we present that, suggest to the community that we need to manage down to 2. And I don't believe it's a function of equity, and I don't believe we need to approach this through grandfathered. I think we need to look at this in terms of, and it's not an issue of equity, because there are plenty of spaces available in the harbor for people who wish to place a mooring and have the approval of the harbor master. So that's my opinion.
Well, to speak to your points, first you spoke about the wait list and how actually correct is it? How many people have turned down myself or the previous harbor master? You have roughly 200 people on the wait list. You have roughly 20 moorings that are still open in Darien Harbor. Those will be occupied this year. So now you have a wait list of roughly 180. If you wanted to go crazy and take 30 off that, you still have 140, 150 people on the wait list, legitimately waiting. There is a demand. Now, just as a matter of fact, the position of the previous harbor master was to have 3. When I did my research, I found people who had 3 moorings did not have 3 vessels. Some only had 2, some only had 1. When I actually got down to the actual number of people that had 3 moorings and had 3 boats, it was only 1 family. 2 in Darien Harbor, 1 in Holly Pond. As we talked about Holly Pond before, I don't think Holly Pond is as consequential as Darien Harbor is. It's a littoral mooring, and access into Holly Pond is limited. But with that said, I just wanted to make it clear, I didn't think it was accurate to say that there really is no wait list to speak of. It is substantial.
So that represents how much time? So you're suggesting, so a waiting list for a mooring is approximately how much time and duration for Darien Harbor?
And that's the thing about assigning moorings in Darien Harbor. It really depends on what type of boat you have.
Okay.
So, we talk about there being a mooring wait list and like it's a single monotonic, whatever the monolithic thing. And it's really not accurate, and it's very different than parking spaces in the town parking lots, because one parking space is pretty much like another, except for the slight inconvenience of having to walk a slightly bit longer distance or not to the train station. But in the harbor, there's degrees of protection from the weather, and definitely the smaller boats prefer to be farther into the harbor, more protected from the weather, in many cases in shallower water than the bigger boats. And the bigger boats can be farther out, down along the side of Long Neck Point, down near the clumps, and they can ride through rougher weather better. And it's not ideal in my mind to say that everyone should be looking at every mooring, and if you don't pick the southernmost mooring in the harbor and you have a 18-foot center console, that you are somehow like a bad person and you lose your mooring spot. That's not fair. It's not optimal, I don't think. At the same time, I think that sailing is an important tradition in Darien Harbor. And first of all, there aren't many people who have 2 boats, but many of the people who do have 2 moorings have both a center console and a sailboat. And I think from a policy point of view, we should not be, and I think my intuition is if you make people choose, they'll choose the motorboat, because that's the thing about the trends these days. But I don't think from a policy point of view that we should be putting into effect rules that say to people you can't keep a sailboat in the harbor at the expense of having a motorboat. Now, again, we're talking about this like this is a huge policy issue. I think in point of fact, it's a relatively small issue in the global scale of things. I understand how you think it has an optical value. But to me, I would leave it at 2. First of all, I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. This is ultimately going to be something we may even have to vote on as a committee and say, what do we think in whole works? But to me, I would keep it at 2. I don't think it's a big thing. I do think we can find more mooring spaces to help take pressure off of the wait list. I do think John's done a great job over the last year and a half, whatever it is, kind of rationalizing this, and next year things will start to flow a lot better. But I would leave it at 2, and I don't think that moorings are not one size fits all. And many of the people who have 2 have one in the inner harbor, one in the outer harbor.
John, could you clarify how long the average person is on the wait list for? Because I think that's important to this discussion.
If you had to use like an average, what's been used historically, the previous harbor master has been stated 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, I'll speak from experience. I was on the list, I got on the list in 2018, and just this year, I got the opportunity for a mooring in Darien Harbor. So that was, it was 5 years. It's real. It's a real wait.
Yeah.
But definitely depends on how big your boat is. And so the bigger boats who are going to go farther out.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few people when I stepped into this role that had been on the wait list for a very short period of time, and it was because they had a very large sailboat and it was at the end of the harbor. So those people may not wait very long. If you have a 26-foot center console, you're in for a wait. It really just
Can I ask you
depends.
another question?
Sure.
Maybe this is the most relevant question. How many people who have one mooring now are on your wait list to get another mooring?
I don't think it's
There you go.
This is a
one,
legacy issue
maybe
by and
one
large.
or two.
So
It's not a big demand for a second
It's almost
one.
a faux issue, right? In the end, if we don't have anyone and somebody else comes in, they have to get at the end of the list. So if you have 2 people in the 150, it's really a non-issue.
Oh.
It's a non-issue of equity because you have 2 people of 150, and then if anyone else wants another mooring, they get at the end of the list.
That could cut both ways. Then you might say, we'll put a more acceptable form in the document that would pass an RTM meeting
If I can make
and
it-
create the exceptions thereafter, because that'll handle it.
If I can make a suggestion, there's a lot of complex things about this entire issue. I'm not even talking about 2 moorings versus 1, but the fact, as you pointed out, Flip, not every boat is the same in terms of the available moorings based on its size, et cetera. Okay? I think a very well-done aspect of this agreement is the way we called out the hierarchy of priorities. And in one of the later paragraphs here that we didn't cover yet with this group, I'll read it quickly. In assigning mooring locations, first priority shall be given to those persons applying for the renewal of permits granted to them in the preceding year. Second priority shall be given to requests by mooring permit holders for transfer to a different location. In the order such requests may be received. And third priority shall be given to persons on the mooring waiting list. My suggestion here might be to put 4 priorities. And the third priority would be given to persons on the mooring waiting list that don't currently hold a mooring. Fourth priority is given to persons on the mooring waiting list who already hold at one mooring in Darien Harbor, or in one of the Darien harbors.
Well,
To me, that's an equitable way.
Can we agree, just as a matter of terminology, what we're really talking about is the number of moorings you have in Darien Harbor? Like, if someone has a mooring in Darien Harbor and a mooring in Ziegler's Cove, or a mooring in Scott's Cove or somewhere else, I don't think we care about those scenarios. It's multiple moorings in Darien Harbor is what we're talking about.
Berthing harbors.
Berthing Harbor,
Yep.
yeah.
In berthing harbors.
Yeah.
John, could you help us
you make a great
going forward with some kind of data that says
Which is getting at the same thing I said.
the waiting list by type of vessel? I know this is hard, but
Yeah, that is something that I'm striving for, to model other, like, berthing processes, creating classes of vessels. That's something that I'm working towards, but I have not had the chance to do that.
I think it would get us to the point of,
As a vessel, either, right? I mean,
No, but what I do ask for is when someone I've separated, there's actually 2 wait lists now for each harbor. There's with a boat and without a boat. Neither one is given priority over the other. The intention is it helps me identify what type of boat they're after, because I ask them, if they fill out an application and say without a boat, I immediately call them, or shortly thereafterwards, and ask them to state, what type of vessel are you looking for? That helps me define, so that when I put the 2 lists together, because it's based on seniority, how long you've been on the list, I go down the list and I see your seniority on the combined list with or without boat. That also gives me the ability this time of year, and this is the first time I'll be able to do it, is to now call people in December and say, you are now within striking distance of getting a mooring. Are you going to be ready for it?
And to your point, the kindness of that too is you're in striking distance again this morning. You don't have to re-up that slip or your other location, which you mentioned before.
And that is the very reason that there were so many empty, as it's been pointed out, there's been a number of empty moorings in the harbor, is because the way things, I had to do a few things before I could actually start offering moorings. And it got too late into the season, and I had a lot of people turn me down who definitely wanted it, but they were already committed elsewhere. So instead of running deeper into the list and now giving people who have only been on the wait list for only 2 years a mooring in the harbor, when someone who turned me down, who clearly would have taken it, who's now been on 4+ years, it was not fair to continue down that list just for the sake of filling the harbor. And that's why we still had 20-some-odd moorings empty in Darien Harbor.
I'm wondering over time if this mooring wait list will come down through those actions.
Well, I'm approaching this from a couple different angles. There is, figuring out who is exactly entitled to be in the harbor and who is exactly really interested in having a vessel in Darien Harbor. I found first step was moving people out of the harbor who did not have a right to be there. Now in conjunction with, I have from last year's process of looking for people who would take a mooring. I've identified some people who didn't have a boat or weren't ready or are multiple turn downs based on information that I see in the system from the previous harbor master. I'm just going to take the position, Norwalk, for example, has the position if they have a mooring that is available and it is suitable to your vessel, and you don't take it, you're gone. That's it.
Bottom of the list.
That's it. Next person on the list, and I don't know if you're thrown off the list or back down to the bottom. There's a few people on the list who have turned down multiple times. I'm going to offer them one more time, and then I'm taking them off. That's it.
Would you, using your judgment, not absolute values, be able to give us some guidance going forward that says you anticipate net of your scrubbing and a decision, that says, you passed, you didn't pass, blah, 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 you passed that, what the actual mooring waiting list would be by category? Large vessels, intermediate-sized vessels, so we can operate from some facts.
I'll take a shot. I mean, yeah, I'm going to
do
work towards it, but it's not easy.
You can't be too precise about it.
Yeah.
You might have like
Roughly right.
up to 38 feet and 38
Yeah.
feet or
Yeah.
more.
Sure.
'Cause
Any combination that will give us some more insight.
Right.
On that basis, my suggestion is we get some more facts, and then we move forward past this one section so we can continue to be on pace.
I mean, like I said, my recommendation is two. There's a number of vessels in the harbor, with two. I've had two moorings at one point. I only have one. I used to have one in Darien Harbor, and I still have one in Scotts Cove. I no longer have one in Darien Harbor. Two is a number that I don't think is a problem right now. Maybe it will be in the future, maybe it won't. Like I said, once we get a real better handle on the true number of people and actually start enforcing the number of turndowns you can have on the wait list, you do get a more accurate. But we're not going to see some magical number of it drop down to something like 30. That's just not going to happen.
I'm more comfortable with two and leaving the actual management of the system to you, John.
Additionally, if right now, if someone puts their name in for a second mooring, they're a 4 to 6 year wait. So it's not a problem we have to actually solve today. We can agree that there's some disagreements on what it says. I don't think 2 is an issue, it's better than 3.
Right.
Right? And it's 2 and their person still has to wait. It's not like they get moved up in priority because they already have one. They're waiting like anyone else would.
Well, there's a fine point to that, though, that we should all be clear on, which is, because what you're talking about is new people trying to get 2 moorings. We do have people in the harbor with 2 moorings as we sit here right now.
And they should be able to keep that.
And so that's what I'm getting
Yes.
at, which is, if we just literally changed this and said it was 1, then that doesn't even contemplate grandfathering the current people who have 2. I would think that under any scenario, we should grandfather the current holders who, in many cases, have had these moorings for a long time.
It seems to me that whether it's 1 or 2, some of this relates to fairness and convenience. And if you've got somebody with 2 18-foot center consoles, as you frame it, who are right outside the boat club or the yacht club, and somebody on the waiting list is otherwise got to get kicked out to Long Neck Point at the tip, that's kind of unfair, right? So, I mean, it seems to me this ought to fall to your discretion to some degree in finding fairness in balancing people who have more than one vessel with giving people an appropriate degree of fairness and access.
There's a number of things that need to be taken into consideration when you're awarding a permit in order to be fair to everyone else on the wait list and in the harbor. And what we're trying to do here is come up with policies and ordinances that make this more transparent to everyone, give people an understanding of how we're managing everything. But not written into this, is there has to be some discretion in managing the harbor. Because when you start writing very specific wordage, it cuts both ways. And you have to be careful of that.
John, if you were going to write this provision, put you on the spot, what would be your preference?
Are we talking about now the number of
Yes.
moorings? I recommended 2. It was originally 3. I changed, I've made the decision, and somebody may sue me, I don't know, but I don't think so. But there really isn't true demand for 3 moorings in the harbor. So I made the suggestion it should be 2. And I believe I'm within my rights to say it's just 2. But I want consensus, I want to socialize this, I want opinion, and I want people to understand what my reasonings are.
I'm again going to go back and talk about adding a 4th priority as a very practical way.
There's verbiage that I want to add to that. It did not make it into this, but it also helps set expectation on that paragraph on how things will be, how they will be awarded, what the limitations are on awarding based on those 3, call it maybe 4 priorities that you're coming up with.
As a process, as a step forward, what if we hold that content, that concept to that geography, that spot here, and see if it fits on that basis? I'm just saying park it so we can advance forward. I'm not trying to jam the conversation.
We do have to advance forward, I agree. But there's great wording in this paragraph already, to the extent practical and to the extent consistent with all other applicable sections of these regulations.
So can I just make, a drafting comment so that everybody understands what they're looking like if they're looking at when they look at this. When I was coming up with this red line, I took the document that we all reviewed last time and just accepted all the changes. So especially the part of the document that we're now going through, some of that language was just cut and pasted from other towns' ordinances and hasn't been extensively discussed. So the fact that it's not marked up, don't take it as like this is, for the rest of the document, don't take it as this is now written in stone. This is actually the first time we're talking about some of this
Is
language.
there a cumulative black line? So you
We
see
can
what
do
the
one, but that's not, the whole thing would be
We
black
have
out
that.
if it were
Actually, I
cumulative.
think what was distributed, the markup exists.
No.
All the changes have been accepted.
No, it's not. From the current town, the only problem with that cumulative black line is that almost the entire document would be black line.
You have one though, right? So
No.
you can call
I
it
do.
out.
Julie, I can provide that to whoever needs that.
No,
Version
I have the same document that you have,
Oh, you do?
but you can see on page, if you're looking at page 8 of the black line, at least the way mine prints, I think everybody's prints slightly differently, but you can see just the next page from where we're talking about, the paragraphs are numbered or lettered A, B, C, D, E, F, E, and then they switch to 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, that 4, 5, 6 is from like another document. I think you copied it in from Stanford's ordinances or something. So all of those ones, we really haven't talked
So
through
this
yet.
is all new language. from here.
It's all new, and it's not clear that it's actually needed at this point, and it may, certainly some of it may go in the regulations to the extent we come up with regulations. It's much more level and detailed mechanical stuff. So just so that everybody understands what this is not like accepted language.
And can I ask where this language that was imported came from? What was the source of it?
Yeah, a couple different spots. I looked at Stanford ordinance, Stanford language, Greenwich language, Norwalk language, and I think Westport. See, the context was, has somebody thought this one through? And are we starting from, this is new to us, but somebody's either got it right or got it wrong, but can we tap into that? Example of that was that hierarchy of prioritization. I think the author of that happens to be Stanford, but immaterially aware. That was the source.
Yeah, I want to think about the fact that Darien Harbor is not Stanford, Greenwich, or Norwalk. We are not a commercial harbor. And as I was reading these provisions, my thought was, this would be great for a commercial harbor, but, that's not the animal that Darien is.
Yeah, so let's just talk through them, because I think we'll clear a fair number of them up.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, one of the biggest challenges forming these new ordinances is surrounding the condition that we have created over the decades of day harbors. the Zigglers and Scotts. That's pretty unique. I spoke to the other towns. They looked at me like I had 3 heads. What are you talking about? And I said, well, we have this. Darion's different than,
Well, it's both different and same, right?
I
There's
just
common
want us to
themes, they're
think
different.
about that as we
Yeah.
read it, because I think it's important for the culture of our town going forward.
All right, should we try to move forward?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
just in that basis. So looking, 7832D is the new area. I think there's at the end of D, please note that under, I don't know what that fell apart somehow.
You're talking about the paragraph that starts permitted mooring holders.
Correct.
Yeah, somehow in the black line, the D goes below it, even though when you
It get-
print it off in the clean copy.
It's imprecise, but
It's okay
that's
in the
life.
copy. Yeah.
Okay, so any questions on D, the intent? John, I think this is consistent with your operating procedure?
Yeah, that's
State
state,
law,
that's a
right?
state law.
I think you're gonna face pushback on some of those people who have bigger cruising boats or internationally documented vessels and things like
It's,
that.
it shouldn't be that much pushback because they literally can't be here without being registered in Connecticut. And there are boats that have been in the harbor that shouldn't be in the harbor, and they have potentially have a problem with the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services.
Yeah, there's been a few boats that I've identified, and they've registered their boats.
I was one of them. I was wrong. I'm corrected, but I'm corrected. I'm just saying it. It could be, but if it's the law and that's what you're pointing here, that's okay. I was just thinking.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's 2 steps to this law. First, there's 60 days you have to register. If it's brought to your attention and you refuse to comply, then there's a second statute that kicks in. And that is where after 24 hours, after you've been notified and you've chosen to do nothing about it, the vessel can be declared abandoned. Because you're
Can
not.
we auction it off right away?
The boat, I don't ever want to go down this road, but there is a process for it. For any boat that is either not registered or not properly registered, by law enforcement, it can be declared abandoned.
So this is all state law. So
Well,
why?
remember, there's 2 different parts of this paragraph. There's the second part, which is you cannot have a boat in Connecticut state waters for more than 60 days without being registered in Connecticut state waters.
Connecticut.
That's Connecticut
Yeah.
law.
That's a restatement.
And that even includes, if your boat is, say you have a boat and you're from New York, it's registered in New York, if it spends more than 60, and then we have the situation in Darien Harbor, we have New York, New Jersey, or other states registered, but they also have to display the Connecticut registration sticker because the boat is going to be in Connecticut waters more than 60 days.
So that's not, there's no controversy around that. That
No.
is the way the law works.
I'm asking more from a draftsman perspective. If this is state law, are we importing all state laws related to moorings into these ordinances, and why do we choose these specific ones?
Because the first part of the paragraph is actually the policy part that for
It's
the
almost a
commission to
supporting
think about,
statement as
which
opposed
is to say that you can't actually have a mooring in Darien Harbor if you're not going to be in,
The water's greater than
if you're
61
not
days.
kind of willing to sign up for being in Connecticut state waters for more than 60 days. So that's that's for us, a policy. You could say you don't have to be on your mooring at all during the season. You can still have a mooring. This says that you at least have to buy into being here enough that you've registered your boat. And we're just reciting, because of that tie-in, we're reciting for a lot of people who don't understand what the rule is, what the rule is.
And do people actually notify you departure dates? And
We have not invoked that yet. That hasn't been something.
Are you fast forwarding to another section? Or?
That's the next paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh, I thought that. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so any feedback on D as in David? 7832D?
There way mine printed, D is blank, and I have E.
Yeah, that's what.
That's just the way the
Yeah.
black lining happened. I printed off in clean copy too, and the D goes back up.
If it helps to clean copy,
What I'm
Paragraph.
looking at
It's
is,
okay.
is the one that says birthing mooring holders.
Lori needs a
required-
copy of the new one.
Like, this is what came out in email, like, yesterday.
It's the what we're talking about right now is the paragraph above that, that starts permitted mooring holders. It's just the black line, you put the D below the paragraph.
Oh, I see.
so that's where we're looking for feedback on D as in David.
Oh.
I just have a context feedback. We use the word permitted mooring holders in D, and we use the word just mooring holders in A, B, and C. And I'm not sure there's a difference between the two,
Okay.
and I think we should be consistent and pick one or the other.
For consistency, mooring holder would seem to be consistent.
I
Okay.
agree.
Thank you.
My comments will actually next time.
Okay. So
Yeah.
on the section starting with permitted mooring holders, the feedback was strikes permitted to now read mooring holders. And it ends with the paragraph, statement, Connecticut DMV. Any further input to that? Okay, now fast forwarding to the next section. Berthing mooring holders. Any questions on that section? Intent or feedback?
That was my questions are related to this
Okay.
paragraph,
Got it.
this new paragraph.
Okay.
This is kind of meaty.
That
This
makes
is,
sense. It's to the
yeah.
response.
Yeah. I do, in the second sentence, want to put berthing in front of the second mooring that's there. Because,
John, can you say it again?
okay, so you have the first sentence, berthing mooring holders, June 15th each year. I want it to be restated, berthing mooring holders, starting the second sentence also. And this speaks to the differences of types of moorings we have. It states in our current ordinances, you have to be on your mooring by June 15th. What about your day mooring over in Scotts Cove?
Do you want berthing to appear throughout that paragraph?
It really
Even
should.
in the next
I
sentence?
didn't know how to wordsmith it. I was like, should it be like a
No, just,
sub-paragraph with a header, and just, this
just
applies only to
reading
berthing moorings, something along those lines?
you just put berthing in each sentence.
Right. So I wanted to differentiate, make sure it's clear to everyone that I don't have an expectation that I need to see your boat on your day mooring harbor on the 15th.
I've picked up 4 examples of that, at least 4. So I think that will capture that.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got John's feedback. Other feedback in intent?
I mean, I think that I expressed, before the other meeting, is that there are many different types of boats in the harbor. There are a lot of day boats and open, that, yeah, they're going to be there. But for those of us who have cruising boats, who actively cruise,
See, that, the intent
that's why
is,
the consecutive helps. That
the,
helps a
yeah,
lot,
the
but-
intent here is for me to understand, because, also written into the ordinances is that if you don't use the mooring, it could be declared abandoned.
Right, understood.
So I don't want to take your mooring away from you.
Yeah.
If you're doing something, it just needs to be socialized with me if you're going to be gone for a long period of time, because I've come across a few moorings this past summer where the people are gone, and then I see, one of the telltale signs is the pickup stick is covered in scum. So I assume there's no boat. And then I talked to the contractor in the harbor, and he's like, oh, no, they're here. They're just away. So it's just good for me, so I understand. That's all.
I
Yeah.
truly do understand that, John. And,
Yeah.
we had the problem with our boat this summer, and I let you know right away.
Yeah.
She's gone, and the lines were gross.
Right.
What's the
But
penalty for
just
someone
this thing
who
to say,
doesn't
that,
report?
when you say that the boats have the boats occupy the moorings for the majority of the sea, in other words, to me, that's what I want to be doing.
Does this, as constructed, does this meet your requirement or meet your use case?
I think if it's consecutive 4 weeks,
The real heart of the matter here is to make sure that we don't have people stationing their vessels elsewhere during peak season.
Yeah.
I own a home elsewhere, I have a dock. The boat shows up in the shoulder season before Memorial Day. The boat disappears for peak season and then reappears after Labor Day. We have a couple of boats like that.
Yeah, and I do get it, because then there's somebody else who's not getting it. I was reading the context of like, I don't want to be on Martha's Vineyard having a great time, and oh crap, I'm over my limit, I gotta check with Keena, or.
No, it's just,
Remember
it's just,
email
I need to if you're going to be gone for a long period of time, and now I see a grassy mooring,
Right, but if plans change.
I just
is
want to
what I'm
understand
saying.
what's going on, that's all.
Yeah, I'm just saying if plans change, because you can,
I mean, I mean, like, you told me you had a boat issue.
Well, what if
It's good to know.
somebody doesn't report? Is there a penalty?
Well, no, I just need to understand, why are you going, because when I find out you're doing like I just spoke about, well, I really don't keep it here during the season. It's just, this is where I land it before I take it to wherever I'm going, and this is where I bring it just before it gets hauled.
But I think as a practical matter, if someone doesn't report and John goes out and their mooring lines are all covered with grass, he's gonna call them and say, where are you? And they're either gonna have a good story where he says, fine, that makes sense, or they're not, in which case he's probably still not going to take a lot of aggressive action right away if they seem like
Yeah.
they're gonna remedy it prospectively. But if they're repeatedly doing this, then I read this to say that he has, he could ultimately not renew their permit.
The last sentence says, "The harbor master will not unreasonably withhold approval."
That was the intent.
So
To balance
it's
this.
all, I think it covers everything. Covers your case.
Yep,
I agree.
Yeah.
okay.
and
The only problem I have with that statement is unreasonably, it's a very subjective statement.
Yeah, it certainly qualifies your
Sure it is.
approval.
So we have to trust you, so we trust you.
But to the person who wants to grieve me, how is unreasonably defined?
Appeal. They
I
would
mean,
appeal.
to someone
You
only
know
being
what?
in the
We're
harbor.
not going to make this perfect.
It should,
Yeah, I know.
I think, I agree with John, because, and also now putting our town hat on,
Right.
because the town can get tied up in this litigation too.
Yeah.
We should just say that he has the right to make the decision.
discretion.
And then
Yeah.
furthermore, you can appeal to the Board of Selectmen. We have that separate right in here if you think he's being arbitrary.
I think that's like restating what we've restated. At any point in time, the mooring holder could appeal with the processes outlined.
Right, but I think what we're all saying is you could take that last sentence out.
Yeah.
And it makes it a little freer, John. Yeah.
Because honestly, if you're going to put it on that decision-making power I have, why aren't you putting it on everyone I have?
Right, right.
And there's already a section which I have more than once defended. I want that appeals process in there.
I'm trying to soften it. That was the softening so that, that was my intention, is to soften it so that the general public says, hey, while the harbor master has discretion, he will not unreasonably withhold that choice.
But I think that's creating a standard which is like really hard to define.
You can read reasonableness into the discretionary standard that he has, I would think.
Doesn't it come, if you take away, it comes back to the importance of the statements, the intention of this paragraph that all boats be stationed on the moorings as a primary location. That's sort of the big qualifier and his interpretation of that. So I wonder, does that handle the standard
yeah,
adequately?
I mean, it's not me, but I certainly do know people in town who have homes on Block or the Vineyard and are back and forth with their boats for multiple week periods, and
That
they're
4-week
dairy
contiguous
investments and,
is defined now.
are
It's
we
never
gonna
been
take away their
defined.
mooring for the time of year that they want it here? I don't know. It's not my problem.
What also, the importance of this paragraph is the fact that there are at least a half a dozen moorings in the harbor where the boats are stationed elsewhere permanently, many of them on the Darien Boat Club docks. Those moorings remain empty, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that just doesn't seem right. So this is also to enforce that.
Yeah.
John, did you just say the boat club? Did I misunderstand?
Here's a situation that can arise. You're a member of the Darien Boat Club. You're on the wait list to get a slip. In the meantime, you have a mooring in Darien Harbor. You're awarded a slip at the boat club, and you renew your permit for your mooring in the harbor. Nothing has changed about the terms of your permit, and there's absolutely nothing in our ordinances about usage.
Would this meet that requirement, though?
Yes.
Okay, so that would
Yes.
get you, that use case
Yes.
would be satisfied by
That,
this.
that is the main, well, this was like some of what I thought was the real low-hanging fruit that I found out I couldn't touch.
But now with this ordinance, you would be.
With this ordinance, I would be able to. Plus, it also addresses, I'm really not after the cruisers. I'm after the people who have stationed their boats elsewhere and are leaving a berthing mooring open the entire season. That's the real crux of this paragraph.
I mean, I'm the author of this softening, because at some point in time, there's going to be a public hearing, I anticipate, and this will be an emotional issue. So that's why I put it in. You
I
guys,
think
you
it
have your
would be a
choice.
mistake for the town to allow this to be in there, because you're just asking for litigation.
In that case, our council would reveal that, right?
Are you talking about the last sentence?
I think it's,
I'm talking about the last sentence where it says the harbor master
Yeah.
will not unreasonably withhold.
Yeah,
approval."
I think it's
You're
very
just
subjective.
Setting up litigation.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable that we have a town council that will identify any case.
I don't want to
where-
waste, I would prefer not to waste his
it's
time.
a business
I
point,
agree.
yeah. Let's take that out.
I would like to see it removed.
Process point here, we're at 30 minutes to 9 o'clock, so,
We've made it so 2 paragraphs.
yeah.
What- These are some of the more difficult paragraphs.
Yeah.
Why don't we keep ourselves moving along, though? So
Family thing a little bit more, because I
Yeah.
did miss the last.
let's keep the substantive issues, not wordsmithing. We got plenty of lawyers coming at this for wordsmithing, so let's just keep to our values and substantive.
Okay, let's look
Discussions.
at, I'm not sure how it's described to you on your hard copy. Applicants shall apply for new, any feedback on that section?
I just have a little bit of feedback. So here we're talking about people who are already either have moorings or they're already at the top of the wait list and they're eligible to apply for a mooring. Am I correct? The word applicants does not include people who are number 78 on the wait list. That's a different category of people?
It does.
It does.
It does include.
Okay, so my issue there is that I think a lot of the people on the wait list are in a position where they don't have a boat yet. They might have an idea of what type of boat they'll purchase, but because they don't have a mooring, they don't buy a boat. And they're in a catch-22 situation where we're asking them to document registration, we're asking them to show they've got $500,000 worth of insurance. They don't have a boat. They don't know.
No, they don't have to.
Under 4, that is not contemplated under 4. You're just looking literally at what's on your page, correct?
Yeah.
Item number 4, is
So-
4 as constructed, is
So
there
again,
feedback on that?
we're
On
now.
6 it says all applicants must
Okay, yeah, so
have-
let's get to 6.
Okay,
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry,
guys,
I
we're
gotta
in the
get
process are here.
We're now, just to be clear though, we're now entering into what I'll call the copied language from
Yes,
other towns.
okay.
So some of the terminology won't line up
Yep.
and things like that. And this is also at a level of detail that I believe we will ultimately get guidance that this should be in regulations, not in the ordinances.
Okay, good context. So anything on 4? This is the how a person applies for or renews a permit. Number 5, all mooring permit holders shall be responsible for notification of the harbor master. John, I note that there is some consistency between this and the language in the renewal document you gave us tonight.
But all mooring permit holders shall be responsible for properly notifying any changes to the information provided in their mooring permit application. But I think if you're going to have that there, you're going to have to say that any changes need to be approved by the harbor master.
This is about where to record the information. This is not looking for your approval. It just says that the obligation is the permit holder.
Yeah, but if the information that's changed is that my boat has gone from 25 feet to 50 feet, that that is an example of information that would allow John to reconsider whether that mooring was the appropriate mooring for that boat.
Agreed, fully agreed. I think what the intent of this passage is that the responsibility for notification to the harbor master of a change of, example, your 26 to a 52-foot boat needs to be placed, that lies with them. This puts the onus on the permit holder or the aspiring permit holder or anyone on the waiting list.
Yeah, I mean, in the language in John's application, the harbor master's application, there's like a certification that says, I understand that any false or incorrect statement of mine, including all the data you've input into the application, if it's false or incorrect, it may be grounds for dismissal or rejection of this application or revocation of an existing mooring permit. So that's a very, in a sense, it's a very similar concept, which is you're certifying that what's here is right. So if it changes, you have to go update.
Well,
in
there's
season,
certain
then.
things you
That's-
can't
then it's
change,
an
there's certain
in-season,
things you
exactly
can't
right.
change in the system.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
But the point being is you need to socialize the fact that you've gone from a 26 to a 52 footer. You just can't show up with it, because that has something that has happened. Not to those
I think this
extremes.
gets you what you need, and it has not, Flip, as you know, has not been bounced against the renewal, the permit, the online permitting system, has not been bounced
Yeah.
against that. So, John, I think this is what you need or what you want. Is it?
I guess so. I mean, I think that it should be fine, unless someone else sees an objection to it.
This is about notification, and the responsibility of where the
Yeah.
notification applies.
That's fine, yeah. Yep.
6,
So this, to your question, this is really, this should be talking about permitted mooring holders,
Yeah.
right? People who have moorings. Obviously, if you don't have a boat, you don't have to maintain $500,000 of liability insurance.
And just to put out there,
But we-
there's
we-
nothing
this is-
there's nothing at the state level that says you have to carry insurance on your boat, that I know of. And when I've spoken to the state, they're not aware of it either.
I thought we generally agreed that we were going to extract that, any kind of.
Yeah, I think so, because
don't-
I can't enforce it.
Okay.
So we're taking out 6.
Yep.
Just from an organizational standpoint, 7832 was the rights and responsibilities of the mooring holder. As soon as we get to this number 4, we're all talking about applicants, not mooring
Yeah,
holders.
let's just go through it, and we'll have to go back and actually figure out what's the right place for all this to go and conform the defined term. This is all just copied language.
It's in, give us idea of
One's
your
from
intent.
one thing, one's from a different.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's focus on the concepts of
Yep.
it, if that makes sense.
Just circle quickly just back to insurance. I thought there was a requirement to have insurance I thought that was under the
There
old,
used to be.
yeah, like 300,000, I remember, is the limit. I wouldn't want to see a real number in here. I'd say sort of
I
like.
know private clubs can enforce it. I don't know that the state, and maybe I didn't speak to the person that was in the know, but when I spoke to some of the people at the state, they didn't say anything about insurance.
I recall no requirement on that when I registered my boat the first time.
Yeah, I haven't seen it for a while,
For
but there
DMV
definitely
registered.
used to be. There was a time when Tom was harbor master, when you had to send in a copy of your insurance binder.
Right. And did I'm bad on insurance. Did that protect you if someone else hit you? You could claim off his insurance?
Didn't insist.
Like-
No,
like a-
that's a different, this is your liability, that your boat goes adrift and damages somebody else. This is liability insurance, right?
So yes, I believe
Yes.
that, I believe that it does. So your boat goes adrift, hits Bill's,
Yeah.
right? Bill can call your insurance company.
Yes.
And get a claim.
Bill's boat
So there's protection for me being in a
Yes.
harbor where all the boats are insured, and we're not requiring that. I mean, is this the practice of other harbors?
I can't tell you where this came from.
Did this verbiage come from a harbor management plan?
I'm not certain. I'm not sure if it came from Westport, Norwalk, Stanford, or Greenwich, some of which have harbor management, some don't.
Why don't we do a little bit more research on this? Because I remember sending in my insurance
Positive of it,
certificates,
yeah.
and that was more than 5 years ago. And then it just sort of stopped, but I don't know why.
And
Don't you ask for insurance certificates?
No,
The mooring system?
I do not.
Online system no longer asks for it?
I've never been asked. I mean, I've had a mooring in Scotts Cove since 2007. I've never been asked for proof of insurance. And, you know,
Well, I know that
I'm going to go back to the
renewal
state
in the past
again,
did.
talk to a couple of different departments and see if anyone can definitively.
Let's just
Should we be doing
revisit
this?
this one.
Could be.
My notes are confirm if state reg,
Do I think it's a good idea? Yes, I do. Whether it's enforceable, I don't know at this point.
all right. All applicants shall indemnify,
I don't know about, this is pretty broad indemnification language.
it matches up with some form of the indemnification under the website online mooring.
Yes.
So is it redundant? Don't know. Again, my view is 6 is a question for council.
Well, I mean, what are we hoping to achieve with this language? There's obviously law that lays out who's responsible in the case of something that happens. You're making, by importing this, the mooring holder, regardless of the cause related that your boat breaks loose, the mooring holder is responsible, has to indemnify everyone and their brother at the town level for no matter what the cause was. I mean, I'm not sure, you know, why we need this, because there is state law and things will be settled in court, and I'm just curious why we thought we needed this.
It was pulled over because I saw it elsewhere. It probably just that deep or shallow.
So was it in like the Stanford, or do we know where the source of it was?
There is a source for it. Can I quote where it was? No. I also look at what we're, as a, in the mooring, online mooring system, the copy that John forwarded to us tonight, there's declarative. I also understand I hold harmless and will defend any claim for damages against the town of Darien caused by the conduct of my vessel or my moored hardware and tackle. That's in place today.
So, but none of us should take any of this language anywhere as making sense without thinking about it. Because, for instance, the last paragraph on John's, as I was saying earlier, on John's sign-up sheet, is
Don't call it mine.
is the town's sign-up sheet, or somebody's sign, that this P&I insurer thing, that's totally unenforceable. And similarly, there's a huge difference between indemnifying and holding harmless, right? I'm much more comfortable with holding people harmless than indemnifying or agreeing not to sue them. You know, that's one thing, but for me as a boat owner to indemnify all of these people against any scenario basically that arises out of my having a mooring, whether it's my fault or not,
I agree.
is crazy.
So your recommendation, Flip, would be?
I would either strike it or significantly downsize this.
It's a question for town council
Yeah, I
also,
mean,
right?
I think
The overall
that's- fits in
document.
that category too.
I'm
Yeah.
with Flip. I would strike it, or it has to be cut way back. And I don't think most people will even understand what's being asked of them when they read this, most boat owners.
Well, first of all, and then there's the question of where should this language live? Because most boat owners are never going to look at the ordinances, we know as a practical matter, right? And they might look at the town's mooring sign-up sheet, they might or might not, but that's at least something that's like on their computer in front of them versus the ordinances they have to go look up. So to have this in here, it's like hiding a landmine.
So we move on, since this is so problematic, and get to other things that might have hope to discuss.
Look at, now at 7, a complete application for a mooring permit should be made online.
Again, we're into the situation where people don't own a boat yet and they're just on a waiting list.
We're
Having to
gonna-
delineate,
First of all, this is definitely gonna, if we're gonna have regulations, this is gonna be regulations. But I really think this should be in John's, whatever John's, I mean, first of all, there's nothing like that informative in this paragraph. It's pretty much motherhood, apple pie. Make your application where you make your application and pay your fee when it's due. And I think this is ultimately gonna go away and we'll put this concept somewhere else.
The question, you know, I got it, maybe is your geographic question. It also has similar content in section 4. There is similar themes here.
Practically the same.
It's practically the same. Does one support our intent better than the other?
Which one are you talking about?
Looking at 4 versus 7,
8.
Or
Left.
4, and yours is 8?
Mine's 8.
Okay. The complete application for mooring shall be made online versus the application shall apply for renew or renewal permits online?
It's the same thing, but more.
Yeah, I propose that we eliminate the complete application for mooring shall be put
Good.
online. Anyone object to that?
Good.
Because we
Number
said-
8?
Okay.
You're saying get rid of number 8?
Yep.
Okay.
In the case of a new application for mooring permit as distinguished from an application for renewal, can you look at that section, please?
Yeah.
This, I think we've got this
Yeah.
concept already picked up back in,
We've got the mooring specifications complete.
yeah. So that's in section, on mine, this is the top of page 5, 7826-1. All mooring tackle placed in town waters and shall comply with the minimum mooring standards.
John, you okay with that? This elimination of the new application?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, we can delete that.
I actually had that highlighted and I was going to suggest it.
Okay, renewal of mooring permit. All mooring permits should be valid for 1 year and may be renewed in accordance with the regulations. Feedback? B, I'm going to just move forward. All mooring permits expire at a given point, December 31st. Applications for renewal executed by the Feb 28th, followed by submission of registration by the DMV registration by April 30th. That was, I think, those are the dates you prescribed, John?
Yes.
Okay. Those
Well,
meet your
registrations all expire on April 30th.
questions, feedback? A use case
So
that
I
doesn't,
think, I can't remember when you get your new registration from DMV, obviously.
They can appear as early as February.
Last year I got mine at the end of April.
yeah. Does April 30th?
That's strange. Well, obviously, let me know. I'm not going to take
Why
a
don't we
mooring
just
away
make it
from
May
you. but-
15th? Is there a meaningful difference to you?
Yeah, it's been my experience, the more time you give them, the more time they take, you know?
Fair enough.
Do you want to leave
It's
April?
experience at the boat club
Okay,
that I've had with registrations,
so we're going to keep April 30th?
yeah.
Okay. Failure to renew a mooring permit may result in denial of application or assignment of the mooring space location previously assigned. Again, these are
Yep.
examples of language that we've imported from other geographies, other towns. If for any reason a mooring permit is not renewed, the former permit is responsible for promptly removing the mooring.
A lot of times the mooring tackle is sold
Yeah, that's
instead
what I was
of
wondering,
removed.
practically speaking.
It's, it really is case dependent. You know, there are many times it gets sold if it's in decent condition, but frequently, if it's old, it's not in decent condition, and somebody else coming onto the mooring doesn't want somebody else's old mooring tackle. And Sometimes the boat changes in size that goes in the location, the mooring weight is not even appropriate. And then sometimes people are moving out of town and they're just like, it's too much of a pain. I'm not gonna go. Frequently, it's abandoned.
Yep. And that's the next section.
Yep.
Why don't you just qualify it with if not transferred to the new mooring holder or a third party, then they'll remove it?
I don't think there's anything wrong with
Well, then it's a question of who's gonna remove it, who's gonna pay for it.
No, if it's not transferred on a timely basis to the new person who's taking the mooring, then they're responsible for removing it.
Well, they've disappeared. You don't know where they are. Now it
Then it
needs to
becomes
be
abandoned.
removed.
Then it's
Well,
abandoned.
Abandoned, and
they've
but
disappeared
then
no
there's,
matter what.
but then it's a question of who's going to pay for the removal. The contractor doesn't work for free.
But it doesn't what I'm suggesting doesn't modify that responsibility. It just modifies the responsibility.
I mean, look, there is a practical challenge to this, right? Somebody moves out of town, they abandon their old crappy mooring tackle, nobody wants to buy it.
Yeah.
They're now living in Texas. How are you gonna, you don't have a credit card on file that you can just charge them for them. So it ends up that the mooring servicers just have to pick that stuff up.
Take it up.
Actually,
Move it.
permit owner, the new person, is gonna probably have paying for that service too.
No, that doesn't happen if they're not willing to buy the mooring.
No, if they're not willing to buy it, does the person who wants that mooring with new tackle, they will pay for the new tackle to be placed and the old stuff to be pulled up.
Yeah,
This has happened a lot.
that's not like fair that you have to, as a new mooring holder, you have to pay for the
I
old
agree.
guys.
Yeah.
I think the mooring service people end up,
Eating
just
it.
doing it when they have a chance. And if they happen to pick up a mooring that they can resell, they resell it and get a little bit of money out of that. It's not ideal, but it's just a practical
If
solution.
this is something that is happening all the time,
Yes.
I would say you put a security deposit when you get your initial permit. Just like if you go rent an Airbnb for the weekend, you put down your security deposit, and if you don't clean the place up, they keep it. You don't pick up your mooring, you keep it.
That's a
But
lot
it's
of
complicated, it's a lot of administration.
This isn't that big.
If it's
Yeah,
not that big a
yeah.
problem, let's
This isn't that big an issue.
don't keep it.
I think we can work through this.
Yep.
Julie, you had a suggestion on language modification? Or should we go
Yeah, I
back?
made it, take it or leave it.
What's that? I'm sorry?
No, I made the suggestion, but.
Yeah,
if it
I
doesn't
just-
wo- If John doesn't think it works, I'm not gonna.
I just don't know how to, I mean, it's just that if the person disappears, I just, sometimes it's just not enforceable because they're not around anymore. and,
I'm sure a
yeah.
conversation can be had with you if there's a transfer going on. That would, in your discretion.
In 100% of the cases, there is an attempt to transfer that mooring to somebody else.
Yes, there
And
is.
it's only when that fails, which is not infrequently, but there's always an attempt.
Yeah. I listen, we're trusting a lot to your discretion. Certainly willing to
Okay.
take it.
I mean, I also, because I also have to work with the contractor and, I can't force their hand to, pay for something out of their own pocket.
No, nor they
Yeah.
should be required.
Yeah.
All right, do we leave the language as such? Do we modify?
I think you can leave
I
it.
think we can wordsmith it,
Yeah.
but in
Okay.
concept, it's okay.
All right, let's go forward to the next section, new section, XX, rights and responsibility of the harbor master. Looking at A, for the purpose of processing,
I think this is already stated elsewhere, isn't it? We have an
think so.
online mooring system?
I don't think so.
We don't? Okay.
I think the responsibility of the permittee is known.
Okay.
Maybe this is out of order, it wouldn't be in the end, it would be in the beginning.
Yeah, maybe sequencing.
Yeah, sequencing.
Don't even try to, we haven't even tried to
Yeah, exactly.
geographically place this stuff. Any question about the intent here? Anything that would be misleading? Looking at B, John or the harbor master keep records.
Yep, no, that's fine.
Yep. Section A, the harbor master must approve any change to the size, type of vessel placed in a mooring, and allocation of mooring assignments shall be given to blah, blah, blah.
Again, if people like this kind of language, we'll reposition it. We didn't move any of these paragraphs here. We'll reposition it to be in a more logical place.
What does use of vessels mean? So I understand size, draft, type, and use of vessels.
Commercial.
That implies to me like a commercial versus a,
Well, commercial vessels, John doesn't have regulatory.
I know, but so that's why I'm wondering,
Yeah.
I don't, in a,
Again, these came from different harbors.
I know, I'm just suggesting
Yeah.
maybe the word use doesn't belong in there.
Okay, maybe
because
not.
this
Yeah.
is- If this is really, we're really only handling pleasure, I don't understand what use could mean.
Let's strike it, if it's not clear to us. Grant, can you think of a case where we
The
use
only
it?
note would be that the consideration for use of vessel is important, because if it's a commercial vessel, then that authority transfers to state, not
It's-
to town.
Yeah, commercial vessels.
That's the only thing.
Okay.
If it falls under commercial, then it doesn't fall under the harbor master's position. But I think it can go without it. It can be stricken for.
Okay. And I understand the case you've given. So I'm going to strike and use, and now just reads vessels.
I think the intent is that John's looking at the specifics of the craft and is the location and the town all suitable, so. But I think in our harbor, it's all pleasure, with pleasure craft, except that for the moorings that are, we know have commercial vessels on there handled by the state.
Right.
So remove use of and just leave
Yep.
that, leave
Yes.
vessels. to be
We're so
more-
stricken.
Yeah.
Oh, so the moorings of the freight spot, John, the moorings that are handled by the state, right, John?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sort of new, right?
It's unclear when that became apparent,
What's that?
that the commercial vessels are regulated by DEEP rather than the harbor master.
Like,
Yeah.
We used to think that it was all done by the harbor
So
master.
who handles who at deep handles those?
I can't remember which
It's,
division it is.
Joe. Yeah, we're dealing with them.
You know,
There's a,
There's
There's
someone,
a guy.
thank you for that insight.
Yeah, I don't know, it might be, I think it,
no, it's the,
Sue Jacobson?
Yeah, Sue
Yeah, Sue Jacobson.
so what if another commercial
Sue,
vessel
come on,
wants to
you're
come into
misleading
the
us,
harbor?
Rob.
They
Sue.
Pardon me?
take over another mooring and now deep is handling
Yeah.
that, or is these fixed in perpetuity?
Well,
Not that we have a big commercial.
it's not like Deep would leave me out of the picture. I mean, when, they would confer with me to make sure that it would not upset anything else in the harbor. But the actual permitting of commercial vessels is not,
they,
it's not within my
I
power.
believe the DEEP permitting process is at a more 35,000 foot. They'll give you a permit for the harbor, and then they go to the harbor master and say, where can you put them?
Yeah. So, case in point, the freight lobster boats right now. There's a sizable space between the two vessels right now. I've been discussing with the freights to move the boat that's most northerly, southerly to be at the stern of the other boat. Because the problem that happens at low tide, since it's bow to stern anchored, and when the tide is going out and it's low tide, the stern of that boat drifts into the navigable harborway. So I'm asking them to move it up, which they're going to do. There used to be 3 boats in the harbor. The previous harbor master had one of them removed because all it really did was sink. So now there's only 2, and I've asked that, and
Looks like the second one's on its way down.
I
Is
don't
there
know.
any other language in that section that people object to or are
I would
unrefined?
just delete the last sentence, just like we talked about earlier.
Boy,
The last sentence with the reasonable, is that Chuck?
Unreasonably withhold.
Yeah. Okay.
Agreed.
So we work on wrapping this up, it's just a little before 9.
In assigning mooring locations, this goes to an earlier point.
Yeah.
So this is language that I think came from Stanford, I think, it doesn't matter where.
I had proposed the additional verbiage to this paragraph as these priorities are subject to harbor space availability, vessel size, draft, and time currently in the harbor with a present vessel for change in size.
How is that different than the paragraph above it then, John?
Sorry,
Because in practice,
can you say that again?
pardon me?
Can you say yours again?
Sure.
We don't have
I
it.
said these priorities are subject to, and the last part of it could probably be worded better, but I'll tell you what it means. These priorities are subject to harbor space availability, vessel size, draft, and time currently in the harbor with present vessel for change in size. So, if you're giving a person, a person who currently has a mooring in the harbor, second priority, there is a way that you could get around the wait list. You apply for a mooring north of the Darien Boat Club. You get yourself a small 13-foot whaler. Now you have a presence in the harbor. Next year you come to the harbor master and say, I want a 26-foot center console. Technically, that gives you precedence over anyone on the wait list. Now you have effectively, you've gained the system. Another scenario, if you were trying to lock this down, say, if you tried to lock it down and say, well, you have to be so many years in the harbor before you can actually do that, that can also cut in the other direction. You have a 13-foot whaler north of the Darien Boat Club, and now you want a 50-foot sailboat. If you tie my hands with an ordinance that says you can't get a bigger boat for 5 years, now I have a mooring in the harbor, a space in the harbor that could accommodate that request, but my hands are tied. I can't allocate it to you because we've locked it down with a time period. So again, to add that goes back to my discretion of properly managing and fairly managing vessels in the harbor.
So my concern with this language, at some level, I don't have any problem with the concept of creating these priorities, but my concern is that the real world is more complicated than this.
Yeah, that's
So-
exactly.
Like, for instance, this whole second priority thing, what are we talking about there? Are we talking about only people who had a 15-foot center console and now are getting a 40-foot sailboat and they want to move moorings because the boat is bigger? Or are we talking about people who say, you know, the launch ride out to my boat is a little bit longer than I would like, so I want to get a more prime mooring. I'm not changing my boat, but I'm just trying to reposition because I want to keep getting a better and better location. In fact, I might be repositioning every year to inch my, no, but that's what this contemplates. And if we start to, there's no provision right now for doing that, so people don't do it. But if we put this in writing, that there's a rule, and now people say, well, you know, and I've heard this said, farther out in the harbor, the seagulls poop on my boat too much. I want to be closer in. And this you're going to see people migrate around, and I don't think that's what we're trying to accommodate. But my point is, by being so precise in this language, we may create complexities for ourselves that just saying to the harbor master, you know, go figure it out in an equitable way, doesn't create.
Yeah, so this is, so you know, the larger group, this is a paragraph that the subcommittee has debated. And I'll offer an opinion. It was the balance between transparency about how do I manage through this versus restricting the harbor master's flexibility. That was the balance part we're trying to get to. I advocated, it doesn't matter whom, I advocated for a methodology that a person could understand. and therefore is transparent, because this is some of the emotion I've heard in the harbor. And John is given appropriate examples, I think real examples of someone who tried to game the system with 13 to get in.
But it's a practice that I've seen elsewhere, and I know what it leads to.
Has it been elsewhere in Darien too?
It was at one point, at one time, at Darien Boat Club.
Yeah, but in Darien Harbor though.
In Darien Harbor, no, but don't want it to spread to Darien Harbor. It's no longer, it is something that was put an end to at the Darien Boat Club decades ago.
Was it language that did it, or just practice?
It was called an upgrade list. And this is effectively what you're creating is a potential for an upgrade list that allows you to get ahead of the regular wait list by the mere fact that you're already on the dock, or in this case, already in the harbor.
Yeah, so, and you know we've had this, I just say it's a good discussion. If there's different language that gets to that, I'm open. I'd like to understand that. If there's an upgrade list, if there's some language that gives guidance to the permit renewal.
It comes back to having the conversation with the harbor master because you want to change the terms of your permit. I want to get a bigger boat. That is a change to your permit. So you have that discussion. The problem we've seen is the discussion doesn't take place and somebody shows up with a bigger boat. And not so much they want to be moved, the bigger problem is they don't want to be moved. And now we have 2 or 3 people who have done that, and now the boats are banging into each other, and Mr. Harbor Master, what are you going to do about this?
When you look at this paragraph, we should all understand the only real thing in this paragraph is the second priority, right? The first priority says you basically get to keep your mooring from the prior year. That's not controversial, that's not new, that's almost goes without saying. So we don't even need to talk about that. And the third one says you go to the wait list, which of course that's what you're going to do. So the only thing that this whole paragraph is doing is creating this second priority for people to transfer. And so we should address that topic in its more narrow thing. And I do, to me, it's one thing to say, I'm thinking about getting a bigger boat, I need a new space. And I personally believe that person should be accommodated to the extent we can. And frequently that occurs in season and not part of the mooring renewal process. So it's a different thing to say, I don't really like the launch ride out to my boat. I want something closer in, or I want something that doesn't have waves or whatever. You know, you get what you get. And I don't think we should load the harbor master with, imagine the bandwidth that that's going to take if you actually let people know, if you want a better mooring, you can just call the harbor master and get a better mooring. And that you're at the top of the list, basically, other than people who are just staying on their moorings.
So why don't you just take everything out and just add for purposes of a new boat or a change in boat size? Then nobody moves they just can't. They get their mooring place and that's it.
Well, that speaks to the clause I was talking about. I said these priorities are managed based on availability, size of the boat. I mean, there have been people who have upgraded in the side of their boat only by a few feet, and it was inconsequential. That's not a problem.
Right.
That conversation needs to
you.
take place.
We talked before about how the harbor expands southward, but it gets more difficult to use. So that could be a way, for example, a young family gets in earlier by saying, okay, we'll put our 24-footer out further out, but hope to move in. We've talked about that as a way to expand the harbor. Taking out this second priority or not accommodating it would take that avenue out.
I don't know that's so bad that I mean, I'm not trying to create work for John, but so bad if someone says, look, I'm far out, I'd like to move in for a variety of reasons, seagull poop, or good reasons, you know, it's just not where I want to be.
I just don't, I think in the real world, that's very difficult to manage.
I think
Because,
you've been doing it already, John, you get requests.
Well,
no,
and
it's
tell
very different when you
tell
put
me,
it in
tell me
writing that
if
you
you,
have a right and that you are at the top of the list, other than everybody else who's just renewing their mooring. That's the, again, I don't have any problem with a lot of these practices.
So how do you,
It's just when we put them in writing like this.
so this is the thing we talked about before, right? Like, too much detail, right? It handcuffs you, right? Not enough
Yeah.
detail, it handcuffs you in a different way, right? So how do you write it in here that, or maybe you don't, maybe you're right, but like you leave best practices to the harbor master, and he sees that change request that's made fit, and it makes sense, and in his mind, he's like, I'm gonna move this 28-foot boat from the right side of the harbor to the left side of the harbor, because there's more water there. And now I can put a 28-foot sailboat here when it was a power boat before, and like logistically it works. So you can accommodate people with his expertise. But you're saying don't publicize that,
Well, I'm saying that has always happened,
correct?
and that's just happened as a matter of informal conduct, not authorized by any explicit language. And the downside of that, I agree with Kevin, is that for some people that's not as transparent, but it's really, I'm just trying to point out that if you want to be specific, it's really hard to get the language right and not have unintended consequences of this.
John, you had a suggestion basically that if you modify this by, along the lines, I think, were subject to draft vessel size, that will be a key factor in this prioritization for two. That was a twist.
I think that helps clarify it and set expectation. I mean, people do have the right to ask to, you know, I want a bigger boat, or I might want.
You
Revoke
don't
it.
think that you
So
can,
if,
say insured, right? Isn't that the question?
Well, I was going to, for item I, number one, I was going to failure to maintain properly registered vessel. I would strike documented or insured.
Right.
objections?
Is revoking different than not renewing?
It's the important question.
Because it, to me, has the implication that it could be in the middle of the season
Yeah.
versus not renewing.
Is there a condition, John, where in the middle of the season, a
That's why
vessel
you
could
would-
become
that's why you
improperly
should,
registered?
Because it would already be done, so
Yeah.
revoking.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Would you revoke, and that's, that can have no
Wait,
season.
I'm sorry, say it again?
It says it has to be in a seaworthy condition or you can revoke, so that could happen in season.
Yeah. But I guess my question is, does this also capture, like, not renewing? Does revoking also capture not renewing?
I think the distinction you made is post-renewal would be a condition under which the revoke concept would be instituted here. In which case, this, John, what you've asked for, failure to properly register,
Just revoking on.
it wouldn't work. They would have already registered, so I don't think that condition exists.
Well, I think if you just modify the top sentence just to be revoke or non-renew, it kind of takes care of either the application or the mid-season disaster.
But the renewal is every year, so by everything we've laid out, it goes through what has to happen to renew it. To me, this paragraph specifically, you've got your permit for the
Post-renewal.
year, what are the conditions that John
Yeah.
can take it away? To me,
It's a
that's
post-renewal
all this
phase.
paragraph is about. We've gone through all the other stuff you need to do annually to apply, to, you know, to keep
Yeah,
your
most
spot
of these things seem like something you would do in season,
in season.
you'd violate it in
Right.
season.
If we struck numerate I, does that, all the other conditions, 2, 3, and 4, seem to be valid.
Sounds right to me.
John, does that work?
I think so, yes.
Okay, so
Registered
strike it.
mid-season.
If you bought the boat new, mid-season. But I would be requiring registration for that also.
She got taken away. She's not
Removal of unpermitted vessels.
somewhere in.
What about though, because I noticed there's nothing in this whole thing about sort of abandoned vessels, which I don't think has been an issue in Darien Harbor, but I've certainly seen it in other places in our travels
We've
where you
come
got a boat
close.
that's, I know. But, so, could it be something like, you've just got a boat sitting there that's on its mooring, but it's derelict, it's clearly not being used? Do we need to get into that at all?
Well,
It does say
seaworthy condition, maybe that
there.
handles
But
it.
are you talking about broader provisions than just the mooring permit? You're saying like provisions for the harbor master to
Kind of
seize
either or. I mean, I
a
did
abandoned
notice
vessel?
this whole document doesn't address abandoned vessels at all. And I don't know that it should or shouldn't, it just kind of popped into my mind.
Well, they had that vessel in Norwalk, that sailboat,
Swan.
that they took the position that it was abandoned, what the owner at some point disagreed, but I don't know where the harbor master there was getting his power of seizure, whether that was under Connecticut state law.
Well, you have, there's documents you have to file with DEEP, as far as it being abandoned.
Yeah.
I haven't gone far enough into that,
I
that
don't want to
process.
defer this, but for the working, you guys, maybe it's just, does this document, on the topic of waterways need to,
So we'll investigate abandonment.
I don't know, it just is part of it, but then specific to this and revocation, would a really derelict vessel be a reason? I don't have a strong opinion for you, I'm just.
Yeah.
Okay, so noted. We'll investigate abandonment. Is the state statute adequate and comprehensive, I guess? Removal of
But if-
unpermitted
If the
vessels.
vessel's not, this says that if the vessel's not in seaworthy condition, the harbor master has the ability to revoke a permit, right? It does, because the Romanet numerals are all subparts of failing to comply with any permit conditions. But the first clause there is maintain the vessel in seaworthy condition.
Well, I guess the example you could use for that was the removal of the third freight boat. The harbor master did remove it from the harbor. It
Yeah.
wasn't seaworthy.
So I think
Right,
he,
ship it may cover, I think that covers it.
Yep.
Let's focus on the bullets.
Are there other recommendations in that paragraph? Are we covered adequately?
we should all take a look through again the document to see if there are other things that should be listed here, but this is all that comes to my mind.
This is removal of unpermitted vessels?
Yeah.
Paragraph addresses more than unpermitted, so maybe it's more like accurately removal of vessels in violation.
Well, first of all, these aren't regulations. We know that these aren't regulations.
Was this covered in a section before too?
This is a really broad power when you think about it. I don't,
I mean, the vessels can be removed for not being permitted, not being registered.
But you wouldn't get those renewed, right? If it wasn't registered, it wouldn't get renewed. I think this contemplates a period after renewal. What powers do we want to give to the harbor master?
But I'm also talking about boats that aren't necessarily permitted, period, that have showed up in the harbor. Those can be removed also. Because we've had that.
That's that next section
Yeah.
considers that, right?
I think maybe there should be a list of what provisions you violated that trigger this.
This is where I look to other towns who've kind of considered this thing. Do we need to start from scratch? Can we start from their working part?
Well, it's not that it's a bad provision, it just needs to be more narrow.
Is this something you need, though, or do you already have inherent rights with being a harbor master?
I mean, yeah, there's certain specific things that I can have a vessel removed for. I mean, I don't know if there's a big, long list, just that there's only a few things, unpermitted, unregistered.
Right, so you just remove unpermitted in the statement, and then you said for any reason you see fit, really.
But
I mean,
really,
a sunk vessel.
What we're talking about is unpermitted vessels, because John has the ability to, up above, and for a lot of other reasons in the document, to pull your mooring permit. And so for most people, that will be a sufficient penalty, all right? But what I think this is trying to do is, now I pulled the permit and you're still there. What do I do? So it's, if you are otherwise permitted, you have a bunch of defaults, you can work through them with John, whatever, but it's only if you're unpermitted that we can remove the vessel. I mean, it's hard to think of a lot of the individual defaults under this set of ordinances that I would say, yeah, John should be moving that vessel. It's one thing to say.
This says pursuant to sections 15.8 and 15.9, so I don't know what those are.
I don't know what that.
Is there a state standard here that says the harbor master?
Yeah, I guess.
See what I mean?
I guess
Doesn't
there
refer
are.
to anything.
Yeah, so why are
It's
we,
just pulled over from the other document.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right,
But
so
they
we have
may
to
have,
figure out
they
what those
must have
are.
looked at
Absolutely.
these sections at some point, but
So if you take unpermitted out, and then we have to figure out what 15.8 and 15.9 are, because that's what it is referring to.
right,
Bet you I know somebody who's doing that.
yeah, we don't know what we're talking about on this.
Look at the
Julie
statute.
knows that side.
I was looking at
Backwards
the
and forwards.
statute.
You may not be a maritime lawyer yet, but
I-
give you time.
I'm retired.
all right, let's move on to the next one.
Enforcement. Any feedback on enforcement?
What's a deputy harbor master? Do we
Well,
have one? Do we
that's-
contemplate that?
That's in,
Early preambles.
up at the front of this,
Is that-
Yeah.
we sucked the deputy harbor master
There has
up
been a
into the
deputy
definition
harbor
of
master in the
master.
past.
Okay. You want me to?
Yeah, go.
So 15.8 is the power to, of the harbor master to remove vessels that have basically drifted into navigable waterways, while moored or anchored. So the anchor moves, and if the vessel, so it anchors the harbor in navigable waters, conduct or hinder the passage of any other vessel,
Mhm.
then you can basically remove it. So that's 8. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That would be the freight boat that you were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
Um,
We're almost there, Bill.
10 of 10.
Oh, I see. Okay. Got it.
And then 59 is like, I think, procedures for removing penalties,
Procedures for what, please?
for removing vessels from navigable waters, and the penalty. So if the owner of the vessel lying within the navigable waters, if they willfully neglect or refuse to obey the order of a harbor master performing his duties under the provisions of this chapter, the harbor master may cause such a vessel to be removed at the expense of the owner.
So it is just much more broad.
And they're fined $85.
Look out.
If that is state statute, do we
That's
keep this
state
in
law.
here?
Yeah, it's a state statute.
Do we even need to
I
keep it
think
in here?
that-
Or we
I
stating?
think this is, I actually think that this is I'm not sure it should have this reference to 15.8, 15.9, but
Yeah.
this
It's
is
almost
basically, if you don't have a permit on your vessel, the harbor master can remove you from the harbor.
This sort of sounds like language too, that could be commercial harbors too, right? Because if it's all related, if 15.8 and 15.9 are related to navigable waters, particularly in commercial harbors, that has a higher value, right?
But it's also if your boat, your mooring is drifted into the channel, right?
In the navigable channel, right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
again, it's all about clearance, and
Right.
the way I hear that is all about clearance of harbors and,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
But
channels.
So this is two things shoved together.
It
right?
is, and it seems to me that the reference to 15.8, 15.9, we don't need to have that here.
Yeah.
That
It's
already
under
exists.
state
Yeah.
statute.
But it does, as a paragraph, raise the other question, which is if I have a non-permitted boat hanging out in the harbor, what is John's recourse?
I remove it.
But 15.8, maybe you may have that right elsewhere in the Connecticut statutes.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be the right statute.
We may need to tie this back to, because if we go back to the paragraph that we put in here, rights and responsibilities of the harbor master, and the only two things we list are the online system and keeping a list, you have all sorts of rights and responsibilities that conferred on you by the state that we don't even reference in that section. It almost seems to me like his rights and responsibility and the references given him by the state should be just
Reference those statutes in here? Is that what
either
you're saying?
reference the statutes or say that the harbor master, I'm making this up, but the harbor master operates under rights and responsibilities conferred to him by Connecticut state statutes. blah,
I
blah,
think
blah,
that's,
blah, blah,
we've,
blah, blah.
we've mentioned that earlier, that nothing here prohibits or restricts the harbor master from,
His state powers.
yeah.
I would refer to the town council because quite frankly, we can't dictate any responsibilities.
Right.
To the harbor master, technically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more a roadmap for us.
Yeah, I mean,
What you're doing.
yeah, this is to bring transparency as to how things work.
Whether that's a problem for putting it in here is a question for town.
And I think transparency is aided by the fact that it establishes that your rights and authorities do in fact come from the state of Connecticut. The average citizen might not know that. So
Yes,
I think
true.
it's okay to say that, but then just basically, we don't read detail, and we just say,
Right.
Well,
these are where his authorities come from, and
if that's the case, then we could probably have saved an awful lot of effort by saying, look at the state statute, that'll give us our guidance for the town of Darien.
Well, but
No.
the challenge, I think.
I'm taking
is
that to
you
far
will
extreme.
Yeah.
You will see that the state guidelines and authorization for John sort of says he runs the harbor as it relates to the moorings, period. And so
You
we
made my
are
point.
actually playing around on the margin with his broad authority. And
Broad assignment, yeah,
Well,
agree.
what I'm trying to do is close the gap between what the state gives me and what the practices are in the town. This gap that I have right now encompasses a number of things that I can't manage to the expectation of what the town has done in the past and would like, or proposed would like.
And in return for creating that gap, we've put forth some language here designed to create awareness on part of the Darien voters about how you'll operate, how the process that you'll use. And I think that's the balance point, because if we really believe that anything we do, John can do whatever he wants, or the Simon can do whatever he wants, then why are we sitting here? I think in practical ways, John has agreed that, I won't put the statement, there's intent here to say, here is the methodology by which the harbor master will operate. This is his prioritization.
I mean, a lot of the information we're looking at here comes from towns that have a harbor management plan. I sat down and had coffee with the harbor master of Westport that does not have a harbor management plan. They really don't have any ordinances. He said, I've got my statutes from the state of Connecticut, and that's how I run the harbor. So he's at the other end of the spectrum. I don't think we want that for Darien. So, incorporating some of this from the towns around us, also trying to manage to the expectations and the practices that this town has had for many decades now. We're just feeling our way through here. But I think this is great what we've done so far. I think this is really going to help people. It's going to help me, and it's going to help everyone understand how things operate in the harbor.
Which was one of your objectives from the onset.
Yeah, it's become much larger than I anticipated and much more of an effort. Not saying I wouldn't have done this anyway, but it really has grown into a process, and it's great. I think we've really done a good job here. We're not done yet, but.
All right, so we have feedback on all of the sections. I'm going to go back. We have one member of the commission that's going to offer language associated with, forgive me, the assigning more locations, prioritization, some language we'll get from you, sir.
Yep.
I think our next step will be to redraft this.
Yeah, I
Working-
have the master of this, I think, right now.
Yep.
So
You have master 4.
I'm happy to turn another version if people want to send me comments or
Copy of
whatever.
that.
So it doesn't get too confusing.
So going forward here, we're not intending to have another special meeting before the close of the year, I believe, right? This is the input from the commission. I think the next stage is
Well,
going
we
to,
need one more turn
yeah,
before it goes to council, right? Because we've got to be satisfied from the beginning to the end, whereas we've only worked on the second half now, but we've got to be satisfied with a continuous document and probably properly ordered and paginated while we're at it before we give it to council, to ask them to help us strip out anything that might more naturally be deemed a regulation.
but I would suggest I keep it the committee. I think it would be nice for this group to have something where these questions
Where
are
the
stripped
committee
out
says
at this
it's
point.
done.
Where
Yes.
the council has said, hey, this is a little stripped down and
Yeah.
is a little more core. And to the extent that a document surfaced with the commission as a whole, it next be that council-proofed version. So we have it a little more consolidated.
Do we have some material points, though? We haven't settled on how many moorings. We didn't have a vote on that, right? We didn't settle on identification. I know several of us feel strongly about that.
I don't think it's
We
been,
deleted the indemnification and we settled on 2 moorings.
Family thing.
it's not been a vote on that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's going to be the
Want to
commission.
vote on the number of moorings?
As written,
I don't think we should have a vote. I think there's too
Why
much
not?
to be taken as a whole here. I mean, I think this is still pretty broad-ranging, and I think we need to cinch it down to a tighter product. It may take another special meeting of the commission to see that product and give polishing remarks and/or a vote. I don't think we're there yet.
well, I'd like to see the subgroup turn something that they think is ready for council and the broader group, perhaps.
I agree. I think this has been talked about at length.
You have no idea.
But I think we can
I
highlight.
applaud everyone's effort, but I think that we've talked over every single point in this document.
Not something that
I think one area we do need your help for, we didn't review we reviewed new material tonight. We need your feedback to confirm that what was originally, what came into RAF 4 and previously done in the last meeting reflects your intent.
Did anybody actually have a chance to look at the red line part of it, and did anything jump off the page to people as being inconsistent with your understanding?
yes and no.
Okay, that's good.
That's the right answer.
Well,
So-
the subgroup will go back and we'll draft in the comments you've given us today.
I guess we can wait for the subgroup to surface something and see how they'd like the commission as a whole to respond.
Yeah.
I guess I would suggest, it seems unlikely prior to the holidays that we reassemble on this. I would suggest that to bring in counsel. Go ahead, sorry.
The literal rights is an open issue as well.
The Torah rights.
The Toro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of things that would really benefit from council seeing, sweeping through this and more concise thing presented to the commission. I doubt that's all going to happen pre-holidays, and then we reassemble. So the whole commission can sit and await how you guys want to handle the next step.
Well, that all makes sense. I think we should get to a point at some point where we also run a draft of this by the Marine Police, and probably the mooring guys at Norotan Yacht Club to see if there's anything that, I don't think there will be anything that's,
So I've got a draft for the Marine Police with the language of the speed zone. So I've got a draft of that, I just have to polish that up and send it off to Sergeant, whatever his name was.
Oh, Mary,
Yeah, that's the one. So that's ready. That, I hadn't, the idea of the contractors. John, do you know who the contractor, I mean, Norotan is a contractor?
Norm Edwards. There
Is
might
that
be
your
one,
suggestion?
there might be one other in the harbor, but we might have only like
I don't think
one-off.
there's, actually, as I say that, that's the minimum mooring standards is what we really need to work with those guys.
Because this document just
Yeah.
said have to abide by
Yeah.
minimum. ones.
Right or wrong.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's mostly the Marine Police.
So that's an easy one. That's literally, that's, as soon as I polish up that. I just basically took the copy and said, listen, can you, as constructed, is it clear? Is it enforceable? Do you have any recommendations for change? Then the subcommittee meets. We'll polish it up. The next question becomes, do you want this to go to the commission? We'll talk this as a group, the commission for final blessing, and do we need to do that before, after? And we will have feedback from Kate Bush, the town administrator, and guidance as well that said, listen, this is beyond my scope, she'll say, and guidance and recommendation should it go to town council.
So we don't, and traditionally, we haven't met before February. That's been our first meeting. We have 8 meetings of the year. That's what we've decided in the past years, and we start in February. Why don't you keep us informed via the chair in January, chairs, and if we need a special meeting in January, I think perhaps people could assemble.
Could we have an incremental, do we need a special meeting? I mean, this distinction of meeting,
Or we-
special meeting, or create an incremental meeting of the commission in January?
The new-
Usually a commission, or you set your schedule for the year, and you vote on it as a group, and then it's kind of posted for the year to get your room assignments and all that. And I checked with Kate, and she said any meeting that's not scheduled at least 30 days in advance.
Yeah, and that's where we
is considered a
corrected the
special
last one,
meeting.
yeah.
It's a special meeting.
What's happened generally, as the New Year's come on, I've put a schedule together, or Flip's put a schedule together, and we've cleared that with Town Hall. So the new chairs could decide to do something different. We could propose to everybody that we do meet in January.
Two, if you took this literally and said that second priority will be given to requests by mooring permit holders for transfer to a different location, that doesn't include upgrading to a bigger boat in a different location. Okay, just a transfer to a different location allows for those people to say, I'm out too far, the seagulls are on me, I'd like to move in, rather than you taking somebody off the wait list and moving them into that available.
That's a use case. Yeah.
So if you limited it to transfer to a different location and didn't open up the opportunity to bring in a boat of a different classification, I think, or maybe put some more words to define this, I think we'd be in the place we want to be in. The problem that you're pointing out is the practice of the 13-foot whaler up at the mouth of Goodwives River, that guy coming in and being able to get in front of someone who's been on the wait list, who's been waiting for a 34-foot slip.
If we do
How
that,
about if we approach this from a slightly different direction, which is to put something in here in writing to let people know that you can, it's possible to transfer moorings, but we said at the harbor master's discretion, people may be able to approach him and request different, to transfer mooring locations.
Right.
And the harbor master will attempt to satisfy those, transfer requests prior to reallocating new moorings.
That's
Due to
what's-
hardship, danger, something like that, you could specify some
I
general.
don't even know
That's
if
constructive
we need to
slip,
get
I think it
into
does that. Second priority does that. It talks specifically
Transfer.
about transfer to different location.
No, but correct, but what I'm trying to get away from is the concept of second priority. Because when you make it as specific as that, then you create the incentive for gaming. Versus when you just say, you can pick up the phone, call John, and say, for whatever reason, I want a different mooring, and he will consider that request and try to accommodate.
So why don't we dump 1, dump 3, and just talk about 2? Because both 1 and 3 are,
Now, one is critical, because it says basically, I view, the intent is if I'm a mooring holder, I want to expect.
But no, I don't think anybody is even debating 1.
yeah. nobody's
Right,
debating.
nobody, we don't, whether we say it or not, nobody's
Yeah, that's-
debating 1.
Do we need to restate one then? Is it your statement?
Yeah, you don't need to restate it. You don't need to state it because it's natural. So-
You could just,
No, it's natural, I
Well,
think.
no, but like
guys.
not for nothing, but like our lottery for every year, our kayak racks, if you had it last year, you don't necessarily get it this year. It's a new open lottery every year. The same for the seasonal paddle tennis. Just because you had Wednesday nights at 7 last year, doesn't mean you get Wednesday nights at 7.
Okay, so just don't even say second.
So,
you can take the
Just leave
second
it as
out.
1, and then the second priority, don't even say second priority. Just say,
1 and 3, and then a qualifying line along Flip's statement.
yes, you know,
That's interesting.
The idea of this language really was, the genesis was to say, listen, if I have an existing boat and I want to change to a different mooring, either because it's bigger or smaller, should I go in front of the person who doesn't have a boat? That was really the,
Or does have a boat, is just otherwise on the wait list.
yeah. So once you guys give us your view about how we should prioritize that person, you've got a boat, and a person next to you doesn't have a boat, and doesn't have a mooring. If you have a boat, should you go, and you have a bigger boat or smaller boat, should you go, in terms of getting a different mooring assignment, should you go in front of the person without a boat?
I would vote yes.
Yes, with
Yes.
relinquishing your.
But remember, yeah, because they're always freeing up, if they're transferring moorings, they're freeing up a spot as they go to.
That's right. And
So
that
that
guy
was
can
the-
get on your roll tomorrow.
Yeah, that was the, two things. Number one, if it's yours and you do bona fide renewal, it continues to be yours. Number two is, the intent was, if you have a boat, you should go ahead of the person, you have a boat in a mooring, you should go ahead of the person who doesn't have a boat mooring. And that was just prioritize that.
Right, but to me, you do it in a general way, or you do it because you're changing your boat, not because you just don't like your mooring. I just personally think that,
that you don't like the location of your mooring.
yes,
Because if you're gonna take your mooring, it's gonna cost you to pick up your mooring and move it to that one spot and move the other mooring. I mean, somebody's gonna have to pay for that if they're not
Right,
gonna
but-
take that mooring.
but, I mean, for instance, people love to be where your mooring is.
Bring me into this.
Yes. But, I mean, in a very.
That's how those got there.
There's very sheltered waters, so if we create this, that you can just say, oh, I want a different mooring, there will be a wait list, a new wait list that we have to create for people to get in all of those prime moorings. Because I'll put my name on that, if you can tell me I can just go there. Next time somebody sells their boat there, that I'll get that mooring. That'll be a new wait list. And I just think that it's one thing to say, if you're getting a new boat, we'll try to accommodate you with a mooring that will fit your new boat. I don't have any problem with that. And I think that will just kind of play out in the natural course.
What if we
If you-
modify that? I mean, taking that literally, looking at section, the second condition, the second party shall be given to request by mooring for transfer to a different vessel, different size vessel?
Yeah, I mean,
That was really the intent of our discussions. Prioritize, what's the pecking order here? And it says we put on the bottom of the pecking order the person who doesn't have a mooring, does not have one in place today.
I think
So-
to Flip's point too, maybe you take out the language of identifying second and third, right? 'Cause if you, or no,
Then they're all equal
If
then.
you change that language.
If they're all equal, then they're all equal. We do nothing. So my proposal is transfer of it to a different size, draft, or type of vessel. So let me propose that. Second party shall be given to request by mooring permit holders for transfer to a different size, draft, and type of vessel in the order such request may be received. That essentially captures
Isn't
what
that
you
the
want.
gaming that you were talking about?
My head's kind of spinning right now.
Okay. I thought that was the gaming. I thought the example that John gave of the person who put a 13-foot whaler in 2 feet of water up in the
Yeah.
At the
In
mouth
some
of the
cases,
river.
it's gaming, in some cases it isn't. Because if you just want a 26-foot center, if you had to go from a 13 to a 26-foot center console, you're gaming the system. But if you want to go from a 13 to a 50-foot sailboat at the end of the harbor where there's plenty of space, I could probably award you that space regardless of the fact
But
that you
there's
have a
no
boat in the
scarcity
harbor.
there. I think
But
the
there's-
example we're trying to watch out for is I've been on the waiting list for 5 years, waiting for a slot for my 26-foot.
And that's where the discretion comes in place.
Whaler who put that out there just last year, get ahead of me, that would drive me crazy.
Yeah, and that's where the discretion has to be in place. I'm sorry?
The guy with the 13-foot, did he have to get a mooring permit from you?
Yes.
For a 13-foot whaler.
He is a permittee, and he went to the trouble of getting tackled, just
Well,
devil's advocate. if
Right,
you
but the
want to-
problem now is you say you've been on the wait list for 6 years with your 26-foot center console. You're on the wait list.
Yeah, but if,
Now, he's in the harbor with his 13-foot whaler, which is going to become, that's going to become what do you call it? Rotating door,
but
where people are going to be trying to go in and then immediately move out to the main harbor
But
with
John,
a larger
I
boat.
think the thing that's in your mind that's not in everybody else's mind is the concept that the moorings that are north of the boat club, up Goodwise River, which are really not good for much other than very small boats, is the concept that people, that may, because there's a limited universe of boats that could go in there, that may get to be what I'll call a nursery for small boats. And that people get, and that might be something that you can get a boat in like one year immediately. Right? And that people could game it that way. If they were
Yeah.
truly waiting for 4 or 5 years for their 15-foot whaler to get a mooring, and then the next year they decide to get a 26-foot center console, that wouldn't seem like that was an abuse of the system versus you can put a 15-foot whaler in this year and then apply to rotate the next year.
Because it's also a natural progression too, that like, you have you start with a 15-foot whaler or a 15-foot, side console or whatever, and then you're like, well, it'd be kind of nice to have 22. And that's like the natural progression that is fair and okay, but again,
And similarly, even if that area ends up being a lot of small boats, if you had a 15-foot whaler for 5 years that you kept on that mooring, and then you decided to get a 26-foot center console, that would seem like you were not gaming the system.
Yeah.
You were just doing the
And that's
normal
something
thing.
that I would have to measure and take into consideration.
So it is.
We tried
again,
this a bunch of ways, guys, so we're clear. You can see that we've worked this issue, right down to the point where, what's the period of time that you could have a 13-footer?
So it's 9:20. Do we want to keep on going indefinitely, or do we want to put a cap on what we're doing here? I've obviously not kept us to
Indefinitely
9.
does not sound that good.
I've not kept us to 9 PM. Do we want to wrap this up like in the next 5 minutes? Just grab
Well, we only
the top
have a
level?
page and a half to go.
But at our current rate, I'm not sure that's before 10 PM.
I'm used to late meetings.
I think
so-
that, we went quickly through some of this is one of the most controversial paragraphs. So I think we can,
We got to work this one.
once we
should
get
have your
this
input.
one, I think we can move through the rest
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
So,
But the question is, what do we do? I still personally, if I were to vote, I would vote for making this language general to say that the harbor master, at the harbor master's discretion, you can go to him and ask for an upgrade, and he will attempt to accommodate that if possible. So that people know that there's an ability to do it, but there's not a lot of detail, and that you do ultimately have to rely on the harbor master kind of actually being fair and doing his job.
and this is not about John, this is contemplating 2 harbor masters in advance. I mean, that's our job.
Yeah,
is to-
absolutely. You have to
So
take
John is the greatest.
Coming out of it.
So, there's the balance point is, transparency and clarity about under which conditions will I be awarded this goes to waiting list, as opposed to specificity and driving his hands down. I'm going to put proposed language, and I'll say it again. Second priority should be given requests by mooring permit holders for transfer to a different size, draft, and type of vessel in the order such request may be received. My view is that doesn't restrict John's ability to place the vessel. In fact, it gives John latitude to say, listen, I can't accommodate you now because the boat you want to put there is bigger or smaller than it deserves. It could also be smaller, that you want to put a smaller boat there when it has room for a bigger boat.
It's really about the time and, a lot of it also factors is the time and place that the request is happening. This year may be no good, next year it may be good. But you have to set that expectation with the person who wants to upgrade or move or whatever.
There's also a little complexity in this, in that, at least what I've seen happen in the last year and a half, the kind of transfers that we're talking about in the second priority don't occur in the normal mooring renewal cycle, they occur mid-year.
Yeah.
And so there's a little uncertainty as to how this kind of works.
Don't we assign moorings all year, though? I mean, there's openings, the vast majority come through in the beginning, I get it.
Ideally, you wouldn't. You would like to assign everything at the beginning of the season, but like coming off the back of COVID and having many unoccupied moorings, new harbor master coming in, getting his head around what's going on, why do we have so many open spaces? This past season was not typical. Next year should be more typical. We should have a fuller harbor.
Meaning less moorings that don't have vessels on them.
Exactly.
And as a result,
Right.
should be a reduction in the waiting list.
Fewer or no winter sticks and, occupied moorings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a different view, different language.
I thought that made sense, Kevin, and if we want to carve out something separate for people who want to have a different location, just because they don't like their location, then that, I think, that's a separate thing.
Could you live with that as a group, saying that we'll adopt this concept of, and then we'll put in other language that says, the process for people who just wish to change moorings for the same size vessel?
Change locations, yeah.
Locations, looking at the same size
Locations
vessel.
for their existing vessel.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that is entirely at the harbor master's discretion. They can go ask him, but it's
Because that
at his
gets down
discretion.
to, say, Grant's wonderful location becomes available, should that go to somebody else with a same-size boat who's been way out in the harbor for 4 years versus somebody brand new? I don't know what the right answer to that is, so
Harbor master's discretion.
that's got to be
Yeah,
harbor
it-
master's discretion.
Is it transfers of convenience? Would that be the
I have an idea.
title of it?
we start off with, without even starting to talk about priorities, we say, existing permit, existing mooring holders always have first priority on their own mooring the next year. I haven't worded that out yet.
That's a concept.
Okay, but that's a concept, that's a given. Now, you construct the rest of it when a new mooring becomes available. That's the event that spurs this priority list. A new mooring becomes available. First priority for that new mooring should be existing mooring permit holders of vessels of appropriate size for the available mooring who want to be relocated to the available mooring spot. Okay, I can reduce those words, but that's the idea. And then the second priority for that mooring that became available would be persons on the mooring waiting list. That takes out all of the noise of
There's
the
one other use
person who
case.
wants to upgrade into the bigger boat, and he's going to get on the front of the list by this gaming methodology that you talked about.
Could you repeat the second condition, the second priority?
The second priority is, just as it says right now, given to persons on the mooring waiting list. So I'm not splitting it into three priorities. We're just stating that existing mooring holders wishing to stay on their own mooring are always given
Yeah,
priority.
that's clear.
for that mooring. That's clear.
That point's clear, yeah.
And then we just put two priorities on the event that is created by a new mooring becoming available in the field. When a new mooring becomes available, the first priority for that mooring is an existing mooring permit holder of a vessel of appropriate size who wants to take that location. The second priority is the persons on the mooring waiting list.
Yeah, doesn't have a vessel, okay.
And then
John?
that takes away what you're worried about.
Takes away what you're worried
Yeah,
about.
it does, it really does.
I think that's a good method. There'd be a few things that I would have to measure
You have
and
to
look at.
wordsmith it a bit, but.
Yeah, but, I mean,
I
The w-
propose to send us the language.
I will.
Draft
it,
I'll draft
and,
it up and
yeah.
send it.
Draft it up and send it. Okay. I'm going to continue. In assigning more locations and issuing permits, harbor master shall, to the extent possible.
Does
This
everybody
littoral right?
understand what this whole section, the right of littoral
Littoral.
property owners, do you understand the issue? So there's general right to access navigable waters if you have a waterfront house. And so in many cases, that's interpreted as you have right to a mooring. But the specific thing that I think we need to think about as a group is, it seems pretty obvious if you live on the shores bordering Darien Harbor, that means you get to have a mooring in Darien Harbor. But what if you live on Butler Island or Contentment Island or somewhere else and you have a waterfront house? Do you get to have first priority? In essence, this is a new priority that supersedes almost anything else in here. Do you get to have first priority into Darien Harbor, even though you don't live contiguous to Darien Harbor? And this also just applies, let me just continue the scenarios. There are people who live up Goodwives River, just not far from Darien Harbor. That all dries out at low tide, so do you give them moorings out in Darien Harbor as a first priority thing? So that, to me, we need to understand that complexity in thinking about this paragraph.
Flip, I always thought littoral rights were very specific in terms of the property line that you have being projected out on the water
In front of your house.
Right, basically at a right angle to your house.
Yeah, I don't believe the language is actually specific to anything, but
Is this a state obligation?
Yes, it's a state issue. What it boils down to, littoral rights. If you have waterfront property, it's somewhat your guarantee that you have access to navigable waters. Now, you can get access to navigable waters three ways: right from your beachhead, your dock, or a mooring. So if your beachhead is tidal mudflats, you really don't have access to navigable waters. So what's your next option? You could put a dock in, which would satisfy your littoral rights from a state standpoint, but you might only be able to launch your boat an hour or two a day, depending how far up you are Goodwives. So the third option is a mooring in the harbor, and then the only question is how do you get to it?
I don't know that that's right. I don't know
That's
that
the way- that's the way
I don't know
I've
that
read it.
that last option is. I
That's the
think-
way I've read, well, it's the guarantee to navigable waters and, navigable waters.
That doesn't mean you have navigable waters anywhere. It doesn't mean that at all. That would be an interpretation that's just, I really believe that.
Is the state
So
statute?
I think there's.
You should get the lawyers
I
to
think
find
there's
that
a
out.
legal issue,
Yeah.
and I've read the language, and it's not specific,
Yeah.
one way or the other, really.
Should we be trying to make it specific, or should we look counsel to make it specific, or should we just accept that it is ambiguous by design from the state, and we have to duke it out?
I think if somebody went to the state and they have waterfront property,
Yeah.
and you denied them access to navigable waters, you'd end up with a situation like we had in Greenwich recently.
I mean, has this been litigated? It seems like an issue that would.
And
I would think that this is going to be.
That's so-
Ultimately, in the end, that person in Greenwich got access, and from what I could understand, they ultimately got access to have that dock because they had littoral rights.
But it was to a dock that came into their property.
But that's part of your
The
littoral
whole thing is
rights.
about the location of their property. I mean,
Yeah.
you could say I've got littoral rights on the entire ocean.
Do we even need to consider this in our ordinances?
Well, it does get into the allocation, if you're, again, being very explicit about the prioritization of who gets what moorings, this is another class of people who have a priority potentially under, well, certainly the people who live right on the harbor have a priority. It's a very high priority.
Right.
And then it's a question of people who live at other places.
I
if
would
they
take
have
it
any
right to the
priority.
lawyer before you even think about any of this stuff, because having gone through this, and having gone through it here and in Rhode Island, it was very specific, and there were people who lived further in and they wanted moorings, couldn't get it in Rhode Island. I'm not sure why it would be any different in Connecticut.
Yeah, the Connecticut government portal says that you have the right of access, the property owner has right of access, reasonable access to the water from his or her property.
Yeah,
To me, that's,
it takes the whole mooring
I
thing
don't
out.
know how you would be like downriver.
So-
Obviously, Darien Harbor, you'd have to shuffle all the moorings around probably to give somebody
Yeah,
a
that could
mooring
really be
direct,
implications.
you know.
Everyone up the
If
river.
you extrapolate that out.
That's just
You know,
not,
So
that's not the.
I think we need some legal help on this point.
Yeah, I don't-
The only reason I went into this in more detail is
Yeah.
we should understand it's more complex than it kind of appears on the
Yeah.
surface.
Put a pin in this, maybe.
All right, so this, if I make a
Ask
note
about
here,
Is that
seek
something
town council?
you could look at, or
Seek
I'm
town
not
council.
a
maritime attorney?
maritime attorney.
I'll actually be
I just
seeing
really-
one this weekend. I'll strike that up with him.
Yeah.
That would be a good
Yeah.
idea.
It's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
I'll just make my note here that says seek town council on that section. All applicants shall indemnify and hold harmless to the town. This is a recopy of else.
This is a delete.
Delete, okay, or, yeah, okay, we'll just say delete. And we didn't take it out because we hadn't discussed it, but I think that was our intent. In the case of a new application,
It's the same thing.
I don't think this belongs in here, this belongs under the mooring holders
Yep,
requirement.
agreed.
Right?
Well, this, we already say,
It's
this.
redundant. It was a case where the language just was covered over.
We
So
already
we'll
said
delete. Revocation of mooring permit. Harbor master shall have the authority to revoke.
I would just change number 1, failure to maintain a properly registered vessel.
But you already have this. This is a repeat,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Can you vote?
If it's on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not, for our purposes here, it's not that restrictive to have it as a special meeting, if that's what ends up being most convenient.
Okay. So as long as we can vote,
Yeah, but we do it Parks and Rec, and we did it 2 weeks ago when you guys were meeting here, is we set the schedule for the year. Normally, we meet the third Wednesday of the month, but a couple Wednesdays during the year, that was a bad day for whatever reason, so we shifted around, and we voted on our calendar for the whole year. So that's on record now with the town clerk. That's our regular meeting schedule. Any other meetings that would get added, or if a date gets changed, then it becomes a special meeting. But we set the schedule for the year.
I forecast then a special meeting for January on this topic. We'll have the benefit of town administrator with guidance on ordinance versus regulation and either referral or recommendation when to engage the council. We've kept the town administrator, and for that matter, John Zabrowski, a copy of the drafts, so there's some awareness. I'm not suggesting they're waiting bated breath for the next turn here, but there's some awareness of what we're doing.
Nice to keep progress going. February is a long way off, so.
Yeah, great, so that's why I think we need something.
But if this is an ordinance, doesn't it ultimately have to be approved by the RTM? That's a very long process. They don't meet that often. You've got to go through the Rules Committee,
Yep.
which
Yep.
decides which committees they assign it to, and those committees, it's kind of a long slog.
It's a long slog.
Is it long slog, is it long slog 3 months, is it long slog
Could be 3
a
months.
year?
Well, we play it out,
Okay.
Grant. We've
But
we have
but
a special meeting, we
Application
agreed
season
on.
opens in February.
Yeah, no, I
You're already almost out of the water on this one for this season.
And we discussed that last time.
It's not like I can't manage the harbor with what I have right
Right,
now.
so just, I know at some point there was a discussion about having this ready for this next voting season.
Right.
At this point,
I mean, the unfortunate fact is that there's a lot of complex little detailed parts of this.
It's been a good job. I mean, I think we're all sort of amazed at all the details, and I think this effort has been fantastic, getting our opinions and voices. So thanks, everybody, for doing wonderful work. The last thing I wanted to mention is I've got a great set of minutes from Grant. I'm going to drop minutes for tonight. If you all don't mind taking a look at those and giving me electronic approval, if you approve of them, I'll turn those around at Town Hall in December, and we'll be all up to snuff. You're welcome. Thank you.
Many
Thanks
years of
for-
service.
Thanks for your service.
Many years of service.
Thank you. I'll adjourn then the meeting.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Meet in January.